button. So let's wait for the stream to fire up all across those fruited plains of the internet. My goodness, it's Friday. I'm stumbling all over myself. Been a long week today. All right, let's see. Make sure that we're online. Let's make sure we're on YouTube. Are you there, YouTube? Hello? Are you there? Come on. Looks like we're alive and ready, so we can go ahead and get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We've got prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today. I think I botched that intro a little bit, but that's because we've got so much to get into. We're going to be talking about Afghanistan, looking like the country is sort of on its way out. The White House is calling this the retrograde, which is sort of a code word for, I guess, withdrawal or surrender or whatever you want to call it. But they're leaving. And so we're going to take a look at what the White House had to say about all of this. Jen Psaki went out and we had a press conference from her today talking a little bit about what the situation on the ground looked like, because we have a lot of open questions here. Seems like there may be a lot of Americans who are still left over there. The deadline is coming up next week on Tuesday. And so the clock is certainly ticking. So we're going to check in with the White House and see what they have to do about that. We've got to pay a little bit of tribute here to some of the names of the fallen service members that we learned about yesterday. And so we're going to pause for a quick minute and make sure that we honor them. And then we're going to change gears and talk about what happened in the Supreme Court, because last night, in a very late, very speedy decision, the Supreme Court came out, SCOTUS, and they blocked Biden. Remember this? We talked about this earlier. The CDC eviction moratorium was something that Joe Biden and his administration implemented through the CDC, and they just kept extending it. They basically were taking people's property away from them, saying that we need it more than you do because of COVID. And so the Supreme Court had hinted previously that this was unconstitutional, not acceptable, but Biden did it anyways. And so the Supreme Court came back out last night and said, not so fast there, buddy boy. So we're going to take a look at that opinion, go through it. We've got the per curiam opinion that is, it's 6-3. So we're going to take a look at the 6 conservative judges and take a look at the dissent from Breyer, because this is a very interesting case, actually. You can see how two of the different sides, sort of the originalists and the free liberty people, the sort of liberty-minded liberals on the courts, are the people who have this concept of active liberty so that they can go and sort of recreate the laws in whatever manner they see fit. Anyways, we're going to get into it and sort of compare and contrast the two sides. Then in our last segment, a story we've been following at length here, Ashli Babbitt. Of course, we know that she was killed during the January 6th protests, and for a long time, we had no idea who the shooter was, who the police officer who actually did that firing, who it was. Last night, we learned that it's a guy by the name of Michael Byrd, a lieutenant from the Capitol Hill Police. And so he was on an interview last night with Lester Holt, and we have some interesting clips here, and the timing was very convenient. Remember this? We know that earlier on August 24th, Capitol Hill Police came out and they said, listen, we did our investigation. This guy's exonerated, but they still refused to give us the name. And then a couple days later, August 27th, he does an interview. So it's very convenient that as soon as he's exonerated, he's now hitting the public circuits. So we'll break that down and more. If you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. There is just an amazing group of people chatting away over there. Shout outs to Gail08, Kenny 1B's in the house. Want to Know is always here. Chris John, as well as News Now Wyoming. Want to Know again, and K-Cell. We've got Kenny 1B, DG McBride is over there, Miss Danny 2021, Radase, and many others. Over on YouTube, shout outs to K-Bean, Too Legit to Quit. We've got James Kreth, we have MSW20, Med Dennett, and Joe Sosnowski's over there. So we're going to now take a look at the show. But before we do, reminder, if you are over on Locals, this is the form you can use to ask questions. We're going to do our very best to get to them today. Make sure you do your best to try to keep them in order if you can. That helps me get through them in sequence. And another reminder before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the show, if you're looking for the clips, the segments that we clip out, so that if you can't make the full show, sometimes we go for over 2 hours here. If you want the clips, so you can just sort of pick the videos you want to watch, those are all on this new channel. It's the Clips channel, so make sure you go and check that out. And look right here, it says no subscribers, which is just really depressing. So if you want to go over there and help us out, beef up that channel a little bit, we would certainly appreciate the support. All right, so let's get into the news of the day. Afghanistan continues to descend, many people might say, but it is now a situation where it looks like the U.S. is transitioning from securing the airport to leaving the airport. We're going to hear some different terminology used here, so things like retrograde from the White House, from Jen Psaki. But in this segment, I want to just kind of poke around and see what the media is reporting. We're going to start off by going to the AP. They're telling us that U.S. forces, they are just grinding along the airlift in Kabul, still under the threat of more attacks. Yesterday, we know 13 American service members were killed, many more injured, and we also know that the Afghan casualties continue to climb. Yesterday, it was something like 60 people, then 70, then 120. Now the numbers are looking like they may be close to 200 deaths, Afghan casualties, and we saw this yesterday. We didn't talk about it on the show because it was very graphic and some of the imagery was horrendous, but I did retweet it. Somebody posted it over on Locals, showing the carnage, showing the devastation that took place because of the crowds that were surrounding the gates entry into the airport. They were just, people are just so bottled up that any explosion was going to cause mass casualties. So we're going to take a look at that, but let's take it, revisit this article from the AP. Says American forces are working under heightened scrutiny and security under the threat that there's another terrorist attack that may be coming. The death toll from yesterday's attacks rose to 169 Afghans, 13 service members. Authorities are saying that this number could even increase in the coming days. White House and Pentagon warning there could be more bloodshed ahead of President Joe Biden's fast approaching deadline on Tuesday to end the airlift and withdraw American forces. The next few days, said Jen Psaki, are going to be our most dangerous period to date in the evacuation. Thursday's bombing blamed on ISIS-K, the Taliban, the ISIS variant now, marked one of the most lethal terror attacks since 2011 for Afghan forces. So this is a certainly, troubling couple of days that the U.S. military and the Afghan people are going to have to go through. Some people were speculating that maybe the worst of it was yesterday. Jen Psaki came out today and said, no, that's not the case. And we've already been sort of speculating that that was going to be how this continues to unfold, because we've already seen when the U.S. was in a stronger position of power, let's say 8, 9, 10 days ago, whenever that was, there were still crowds of people who were breaking through the airport. Presumably, there was a little bit more security there because all of the Afghanistan army hadn't fled yet, and the U.S. had more troops and resources there on the ground. And so there was this horde of people hanging from landing gear at the airport that day. And then the U.S. sent a bunch more troops in there, so people were sort of scratching their heads. We were supposed to pull out of Afghanistan. We had 2,500 troops there. Now we've got like 6,000 there. So that's kind of going the opposite direction. But so the point here is all of those troops now, the deadline is coming up here next week. We've got about, 5 days until it's time to pick up and abandon ship. And so the U.S. military has to be preparing for that and starting to move people abroad. So I want to show you this image of something I saw on Twitter. You can see this was posted this morning. This morning, 2:42 a.m., August 27th. So, it's daytime over there. And this is what the scene looked like from the airport. This is a mass crowd gathering inside the Kabul airport. And you can see, right, this looks like it's a runway or a service road or something where, airplanes might be taxiing down the roadway so that they can take off. And you can see just huge throngs of people. I'm going to play this video. Quick little just a notation here. There is some sounds of gunfire in there, but you're not going to see anybody getting shot, right? It sounds, what we're noticing here from a lot of the imagery is that they're using guns to sort of stop people and encourage people to, not advance anymore. So as these people are advancing onto the runway, onto the tarmac, you're going to hear gunfire, and it's, they're basically just shooting over people's heads, just to make the loud noise and to sort of scare them from continuing to encroach. And so you're going to hear that. Nobody's getting shot and dying. It's just sort of a deterrent sound, but you can see sort of the situation and what it looks like. It's not good. Okay, so as you can see, there are a lot of people. If you're the last plane that's taking off that runway or wherever that happens to be, you are now contending with thousands and thousands of Afghanistan people who are sort of, I don't know if they're trying to hang on the wheel well also, but not a good situation. And so, the idea that the Biden administration is going to be handing this all off to the Taliban, like, oh, hey guys, here's the key, take good care of this thing, is not going to work out very well. Let's take a look at what Jen Psaki has to say about this. We know that this is now being complicated because of the additional threats. The Taliban was responsible for security. Apparently, yesterday, the U.S. government, in some stroke of idiocy, gave them an entire list of U.S. citizens and said, hey, Taliban, why don't you help these people get through the checkpoints? Don't know if they let any Americans through, but it sounds like they let an ISIS person through, and they came through, killed 13 American military service people, and obviously a big problem. So is that over? Now have they figured it out? Have they, adjusted their over-the-horizon capabilities that they keep talking about that's going to protect America in the future so that they can anticipate and repel these attacks in the near future, or not? No, the answer is no. It's actually going to get more dangerous. As we heard from Jen Psaki today, she's also going to tell us what the president and the vice president heard today. We're going to play a clip from her. She had a press briefing this morning or this afternoon, whenever it was today. And you'll notice now that she's saying the president and the vice president have both been briefed. Oftentimes, these press secretaries will just say, well, the president's fully aware of this thing. And so now she's introducing Joe Biden's compatriot, Kamala Harris, who many people are speculating is going to be swept in there anyways as soon as everybody starts demanding Joe's resignation soon enough. So the president and the vice president are now being briefed, and we're on notice. Terror attack in Kabul is actually likely.
I think many of you may have seen the statement I put out this morning, but just to highlight the reference I believe Amr was making, what I would conveyed in the statement was that the national security team the president met with this morning advised the president and vice president that another terror attack in Kabul is likely. And they are taking maximum force protection measures at the Kabul airport and in the surrounding areas with our forces as a result.
All right, so you heard that. Likely. Another attack is likely. And to be fair about this, they're pretty accurate about this, right? They got the first one right. They told us a couple days ago. We've been following the embassy out of Kabul, watching their press releases, what they put on the website so that stranded Americans, not stranded Americans, can get out of there. They're checking their website, phones, emails, texts. They're very excited about all of their methods of communication. So they've been posting that, and they warned before the attacks yesterday. They warned on Wednesday, hey, look, we've got to notice. They told Americans, don't come to the airport. And there was 2 explosions that happened and resulted in many, many hundreds of deaths. So presumably their intelligence is somewhat good. They're in good conversation, good communication with the Taliban. So they kind of have a direct source into terrorism now, which maybe is why their intelligence is so good. So Jen Psaki said another terrorist attack is likely. The president, the vice president, they've both been briefed on this thing. Let's see what Jake Tapper has to say. He's telling us that now at 11:25 a.m. this morning, 2 private citizens involved in evacuation efforts tell me Taliban's at a checkpoint in Afghanistan are now turning away U.S. passport holders and lawful permanent residents of the U.S. So the Taliban is now turning away people with passports. Now, some of those people might be citizens. Who knows? Some of those people may not be citizens, but just have, admission status into the United States, lawful permanent residence or whatever. And so a couple things could be going on here. The Taliban could also know that there is a terrorist attack that is coming. And so they are taking U.S. assets like U.S. passport holders, people that the U.S. might be interested in saving, and they're protecting them. They're not letting them go through the checkpoints because they know it's dangerous there at the airport. That's one possibility. I mean, it could be that the Taliban is just trying to save lives. We know that they've been changed since they have now been, our allies in security in Afghanistan. So the world is very interesting. So we're going to take a look now and see what Adam Kinzinger has to say. Adam Kinzinger is here. He says reports on the ground in Afghanistan indicate that our allies are being outright rejected after finally making it to the airport. Oh, so maybe it's not that. Maybe it's the U.S. who are rejecting people. Okay. This is unconscionable, he says. We cannot turn our backs on those we promise safe passage, those who have risked life and limb to help U.S. forces. Our SIVs deserve better than this. I'm urging the president to fix this situation. Betrayal remembered as such. Well, maybe he can go cry about it. Now, it's a sad situation, but Adam Kinzinger is just a big crybaby, as we know. So now what we can take a look at is sort of speculate from the other side. Is the Taliban deterring people because they don't want them to get hurt and that the Americans are going to be protected by the Taliban, our new partners? Or is this something that the U.S. is just, we're done. It's time to go. We got to be out of here very soon. We are not taking you anymore, and pass that order around. I've seen other tweets and things that are unconfirmed and from people that aren't blue check marks talking about the Marines and different people actually sealing the exterior of the airport, right? Welding shut the gates and barricading things so that they can make their final getaway, their final leap. And Joe Biden said that nobody was going to be on a helicopter abandoning the U.S. embassy like they did in Saigon. No, it's actually, C-170s or whatever those planes are called, dropping people out of the sky. We're going to see a repeat of that, season 2 of Kabul. So it's going to be terrible. Looking forward to it. Let's see what Jen Psaki had to say here. Now, she is telling us that because of these terrorist attacks, that the troops are still in danger, and they're using this language, right? It's persistent, it's clear, it's coming, brace for it. So you can expect that it's going to get worse. This is where she also says that we're now in the retrograde portion of the withdrawal. This is the time, retrograde is sort of a different term for surrender, I guess, or abandonment or stranding or those things. It's a better word than saying, oh, this is the stranding part of our admission. This is just the retrograde part. It sounds very smart. Probably came from Oxford or something like that. Probably a Jake Sullivan word. So let's take a look over at what Jen Psaki has to say.
I will note that the Department of Defense also just gave a briefing this morning, and I will echo some of the descriptions that they offered. The threat is ongoing, and it is active. Our troops are still in danger. That continues to be the case every day that they are there. This is the most dangerous part of the mission. This is the retrograde period of the mission. And what that means is that this is the period of time when the military, commanders on the ground, and forces begin to move not just troops home, but also equipment home. And that is often a very dangerous part of any mission. But in this case, they're also doing that while there is an ongoing and acute threat from ISIS-K. So that is what they are facing. I would note, since you gave me the opportunity, that the military made clear to the president that they are committed to continuing this mission, to saving lives, to evacuating more people from the country over the coming days, and completing their mission by the 31st. What it will also mean as they move to this retrograde phase is that there will be a reduction of numbers over the next couple of days, and we've been putting those numbers out to all of you twice a day so that you can see how that how we are evacuating people out of the country. Those numbers will go down in the next couple of days, and you should anticipate that. That is as a result of the retrograde process that needs to take place. But also, I will note that, of course, force protection is front and center and is vital to the mission.
So it's going to be quite a scene, isn't it? So let's say you've got 6,000 people here. We've got 5 days left, or 5,000 people over 5 days. Next day, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000. 1,000. Somebody's got to be the last person on the runway on the last flight out of there, I guess. Or I don't really know what they're doing, right? Because they're not leaving any equipment. You just heard from her. They're talking about force protection to make sure that the last people out the door don't get hit in the butt on the way out. And it's going to be problematic because we've got ISIS now, which is a real persistent threat, basically confirming that it's going to happen. So it's going to be just the worst. And if you don't think that it is already kind of like that, it is really the worst, and it's going to get even worse than that. We now know it looks like it's kind of like a free-for-all over there. Lucas Tomlinson over on Fox News on Twitter posted this, said State Department can't say how many Afghan special immigrant visa holders have been evacuated from Kabul. Goal has been put as, quote, as many people as possible on planes. Don't have precise figures to provide, says Ned Price. And so that was from the State Department. And look, Presumably, they are prioritizing Americans, as you would expect in a situation like this. But who knows with this administration? We've already seen them sort of blame Americans for not leaving earlier, for going there, for, they're not stranding them. They made the decision to go to Afghanistan in the first place. Joe Biden promised them that there was 300,000 Taliban and this would never happen, but that's a separate issue. So, we know that it sounds like from Ned Price that it's a free-for-all. They're just throwing bodies on airplanes. If you're through the thing and you look like, you might belong there, get on board. Don't have precise figures. It's basically chaotic. And that's going to be, I think, how it goes for the next several days until we get to August 31st. Now, what happens if you're one of the Americans who doesn't quite make it to the airport? You don't make it there. Are there any guarantees for you? If you're an American and you're over there, your government tells you, we're leaving, it's not going to be bad. The Afghanistan army, the people are going to be perfectly fine. It's not going to crumble from like a Friday to a Saturday. It'll never happen. Never going to see images like the images we saw. Then it happens. So the Americans were relying on their government, taking them in good faith to be accurate in their statements. And so they made decisions based on those statements that came out from everybody, Anthony Blinken and President Biden himself. Then they made some decisions based on that information, decided to stick around. Catastrophe happens. U.S. government says, well, we're still going to bail anyways. Thanks for playing. And so they say, you better get to the airport like immediately. So Americans start to pack up and start travel over there. Then the U.S. embassy comes out and says, you better not come to the airport because you might get killed. And so now Americans are sort of, now pushed back. The Taliban is in total control of the checkpoints, whether they can, let you through or not. We've seen many different people reporting. We've talked about it on the show. People getting to the airport and getting turned back by the Taliban, getting through the Taliban checkpoint and getting turned back by the airport, by the U.S. officials or whomever is in charge over there. And so now you're saying, gosh, that sounds pretty terrible. Sounds like gross incompetence. Sounds like we might have some serious bucket of Americans who are good people, who should be rescued and saved. And any guarantees, Jen Psaki? Are we going to get those people, or are we just going to kind of pick up and leave? We're looking for some reassurance here. Here's how she responded.
After August 31st, for people who will still be on the ground in Afghanistan and want to get out, does the U.S. right now have a vision of a process that they will use to get people out after August 31st? And what is the commitment after August 31st? Is it absolute? If you want to get out of Afghanistan and you are, you help the U.S. military, you're an Afghan, you'll be able to get out. If you're a green card holder or someone else who wants to get out, is the U.S. guaranteeing that you will be able to get out?
There it is, guaranteed.
I don't think we can guarantee, but what we can do is work toward, and this is what the president directed the Secretary of State to continue diplomatic efforts with international partners to secure means for third country nationals, Afghans with visas who may be eligible for our programs, of course, any American citizen who remains in country to leave the country even after the U.S. military presence ends. There's a means of mechanisms for that. Joke. Those conversations are ongoing. That's our objective. Our commitment does not change on August 31st. Obviously, we need to figure out the operational mechanisms, which is the conversation that's underway.
Yeah. They got to figure out the operational mechanisms. All right, so here's what's going on here. Now, if you, like me, have been following the White House's mania over the last 10 days or so, you may have noticed that something interesting happened as they were being asked this same question many times. They've been asked this question 50 times we've talked about on the show. What about August 31st, Joe Biden? Are you going to help Americans that are there past that date? And we've noticed that they really were having a difficult time answering this. We heard many times different people from the administration kind of say things like, well, we're going to do everything we can until the clock runs out. That was Lloyd Austin. We're going to do everything we can up until the last minute. That was John Kirby. And so many people who are in the defense sector, who are part of the DOD, part of military operations, part of that infrastructure, they're acknowledging a hard deadline. August 31st, we're out of there. We're done. We're not having any more military operations. None of that's taking place. But they weren't clear. They were pretty clear about that, but they didn't say it as distinctly as I just did there. But that's what they were hinting at. Simultaneously, while they were saying those things, we heard from other people like Anthony Blinken, like Ned Price, two Secretary of State people who came out and were giving us different answers about this, saying, look, if you want to get home, we're going to get you home. And Joe Biden shifted his statement a little bit after that. And yep, we're going to make a commitment to any American who wants to come home, we're going to come home. And you're going, well, that's not what your military commanders say. That's not what John Kirby from the Pentagon said. That's not what any of your officials from the DOD, like Lloyd Austin, have been saying. Nobody's been saying that. Up until the finish line, that's all you got. So how do you reconcile those two things? Well, now we know it's a very clear bifurcation of the two issues. We have Jen Psaki, who just said, can't guarantee anything, but we're going to use all of our diplomatic measures. And so you can see what's happening. They're separating the military component from the State Department component. And the idea that they're going to save Americans or anybody else who's valid, you just heard Jen Psaki talk about all of the people with visas, the people who are our partners. They're going to use diplomatic pressures from their international partners in order to help people get out of there. So they've got this nice little, it's a beautiful bow-tied, beautifully wrapped little propaganda statement that they can give out now that we're going to go through the State Department. We're going to use all of our international partners to secure anybody who wants to leave Afghanistan, which is really nice so that they can just, I guess, go to the airport that doesn't exist and get through customs that doesn't exist, which is now being run by the Taliban, hop on a functional airplane that doesn't exist, and then get out of the country, right? There are no international partners. You know who the Taliban's international partners are? Oh, Russia, China, whoever sweeps into that and gobbles up that vacuum of power. Might even be ISIS. Who knows, right? They're sort of two feathers of the same bird, two sides of the same coin to some degree. So the question is for Jen Psaki, how long is it going to take for you to establish diplomatic relationships and international partners to put pressure on the Taliban such that you have leverage to save American lives? Because it seems to me like they have more power if they don't work with you at all there. They have more power by keeping 10,000 American hostages, or let's say 1,000 American hostages and maybe 9,000 or 50,000 very concerned Afghanistan people who have helped the U.S. that the U.S. feels indebted to. And they've got that all just in a little pressure cooker that they can just manipulate however they want so that they can continue to gain leverage with the United States. So it's a very clever trick. It's very sinister almost because it makes it sound like they're doing something to save those people that they're about to strand. They're not at all. All they're going to do is just shift it from a military operation to a State Department operation. And they're going to use the State Department, I guess, to exercise the levers of diplomacy with the Taliban and ISIS. Good job. We'll see how that goes. All right. So for the people that Jen Psaki and Anthony Blinken and Ned Price are going to save through the State Department, good luck. I hope they actually are successful there. And I mean that genuinely, because there's going to be a lot of heartache and horror and people who don't make it back as a result of their policies and as a consequence of their incompetency. Speaking of those who did not make it back, let's remember some of them. We have a few names that we now know of the individuals, the young men who died yesterday. First one we got to pay tribute to is Max Soviak. His family released a statement, so I wanted to share that with you. He was a Navy hospital corpsman, among one of the service members killed on Thursday. On behalf of the family, they say, we want to thank all those who've extended our support and our prayers on the loss of our son, Max. Was a wonderful son who loved his family. His community was proud to serve in the U.S. Navy, was excited about the opportunities the Navy would offer him, planned to make the Navy a career. We are incredibly proud of his service to our country. As we mourn the loss of our son, we also mourn the loss of the Marines and a soldier who were killed. Pray for the speedy recovery of all those wounded in Afghanistan. Words cannot express how heartbroken we are with this news, and we will miss Max tremendously. As you can imagine, this is a very difficult time for our family. We respectfully request you honor our privacy. Thank you, the Soviak family. And man, reading things like that, it makes me just want to tear up, because look at that young man, right? He's not with us anymore. Wanted to go serve his country and, made the ultimate sacrifice in the name of good, in the name of freedom and honor and country and duty, and he's not with us anymore. So it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. Here's another one. Kareem Nikoi, not with us anymore. Would often visit home on the weekends, 10 or 15 of his Marine buddies. He's now dead as a result of this entanglement that we have. Next up, we have David Lee Espinoza, another good-looking young man, probably holding his mother there. Came from Texas before joining the military, also wanted to go and serve his country. Also taken way too early from this country and from his family. We also have Riley McCollum. We have here one of 13 soldiers who died, graduated high school 2 years ago. 2 years ago. So, you know, very young man, not with us anymore. Rest in peace to him. And we have Jared Schmitz, we know is a 20-year-old Marine Lance Corporal from St. Charles County, Missouri. Life meant so much, so incredibly devastated to be able to see the man that he was, and won't be able to see the man he was growing into becoming. Heartbroken dad said his son always dreamed of being a soldier. On his first deployment, father was notified about his death at 2:40 a.m. So there's a lot of really, really broken families today and indefinitely in the foreseeable future. These are young men. These are people who are not with us anymore because our government, however you want, whichever way you want to splice it, because we're in Afghanistan, because we left Afghanistan, because the U.S. thinks it can do certain things in the world, because the U.S. doesn't do enough things in the world, however you want to splice it, there are dead young men now as a result of the war machine that carries on no matter who's in charge. So that's great. Awesome. So rest in peace, young men. Hopefully their families find some peace in the world this weekend and in the future. Now, the U.S. government has been asked by the Taliban to keep diplomats there after the military withdrawals. The Taliban has asked the U.S. to keep them there beyond August 31st withdrawal, which is interesting. An option that Biden administration is, quote, actively discussing. According to Ned Price on Friday, the request comes as the Taliban seeks international recognition following its rapid takeover of the country, grapples with a dire economic landscape after billions of dollars in international aid to Afghanistan was frozen. In considering retaining a presence, Ned Price said the safety and the security of U.S. personnel would be first and foremost on our minds, he said. So I'm sure that's not the case because they've been in charge this entire time. And we see what's happened here. And it sounds like it's going to continue to happen. So the big question is what is the Biden administration going to do? We heard from Jen Psaki that they're very interested in diplomatic relationships with them. Are they going to keep an embassy there? Are they going to keep people there to secure people out? I don't know. But what options does the U.S. have to say no? If the U.S. is being demanded by the Taliban, the U.S. kind of has to do what they demand, don't they? Because they have thousands of American and other very interested personnel in their country under hostage, under a gun. So not good. Let's take a look at what is coming in from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. See what you have to say about this. Eddie Oliver started us off with a super chat. Says, why did the children of the deplorable die? Because of failed leftist elites' policies. Rest in peace, Texas vets. That's from Eddie Oliver, who I know served. He's a regular on the show. Thank you, Eddie. Thanks for being here today. Over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, we got some questions chiming in here. We have Rattel_SC says, do you think our allies, England and other nations, were given any advance notice about this withdrawal? With the size of this soup sandwich, it seems like our people just woke up and said, let's fold up the tents, boys and girls. So not much to my understanding, right? As this situation continued to unfold, my understanding is that many of the NATO allies were saying, Joe, you got to keep people over there. And Joe Biden was ignoring Boris Johnson over from the UK and many other individuals. I think didn't speak to anybody for at least 36 hours, I think it was, after the situation started to deteriorate. And so he's been sort of asleep at the wheel, as many of us have suspected. Bama Lickett says, how can you differentiate the Taliban, ISIS-K, Al-Qaeda, Afghan civilians? Just want to know. It's pretty hard to do that. I mean, I think that if it's sort of, the Taliban and the Americans versus ISIS, that doesn't seem like a good ally. Like I think, like the U.S. and the UK sounds like a good ally. We've got common ideals, common principles, common heritage, common human values, common decency, common respect for human life, common economic systems, political systems, all of those things. So that makes a good relationship versus America's morals versus moral posture versus the Taliban. Those are not really in sync. I think that they're more in alignment with the other groups who also stone women and behead their enemies. We don't really have much in common with them. Let's see what else. Want to Know says, do you think the airport closes tonight or Saturday? Reports saying cell phone and internet are gone at midnight on August 31st. I don't know what that looks like. I think for all intents and purposes, it's mostly closed at this moment and that they are leaving. Spawn Dog says, Rob, I was wondering what your thoughts on Biden's response to retaliate. We look weak, in my opinion, because we didn't respond quickly and decisively. He talks the talk, but does he walk the walk? No, he does not at all. Everybody watched him yesterday when he was really straining to give a speech, talking at a very slow and annoying pace. Joe Biden warned the ISIS or whomever's responsible, and in his labored breathing had a difficult time saying that he was going to go get them or something. Now, he has already said that. We played the transcript. I read the transcript yesterday when he warned them, if there's any problems with our evacuations, there's going to be a swift and measured response, or unmeasured. And that obviously didn't happen. So nobody takes what Joe Biden says seriously anymore. He told us many, 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 many things, and none of it came true, which is what a big part of the problem here is, right? If Joe Biden came out and said, look, we're going to leave Afghanistan, and it's going to be bad. Like, you're going to see like a zombie movie. It's going to be really terrible. There's going to be bodies all over the street, but we got to do it. Brace yourselves, America. We go, all right, well, I guess that's how it is, I guess. And then we would measure that accordingly and say, well, he ended the war, but it happened exactly like he said it would. That is not what happened. He said that's not going to happen this way at all. Multiple times over many months. Don't need to belabor that point. But what that does is it makes people skeptical about the stuff that comes out of his mouth, because we know that he said historically that it was not going to look like this. It looks like this. And so Joe Biden now appears to be somebody who is just disconnected from reality, as we've all known for many, many months and years now. We have News Now Wyoming, who I thought gave his PC up to his daughter, but he's back here, says, hypothetical. Based on when you were talking about the last plane out, the media is still there. They can't be forced onto any plane. If the press turns down exit from like the third to last flight because there will be no room on the last plane and something happens to the press, is it our government's fault or the press's fault? Well, our government is going to say it's the press's fault. They've already come out and said that, right? They've already said, look, we were telling you to leave a long time ago. If you're still here, it's kind of your fault. I don't think we played that clip yesterday, but that's what they're hinting at. So the media, yeah, I mean, basically you're on your own, I think, on August 31st, at least from a military perspective. They are not expending any additional resources for anybody after that date. It's all going to transition over to the State Department. Let's see what else we have. Avalon Acres is here, says, what happens when the time runs out? Is the Taliban going to call a last call? Last call? No doubt. I doubt it. Is this, quote, no more after midnight, Taliban blocking the runway with the U.S. plane trying to leave at 12:03? P.S. If the Taliban gets free guns, I want some too. I know it's really unfair. Have you seen some of those images? They have amazing equipment, beautiful equipment, great equipment that doesn't bode well for gun control in Afghanistan. Not good. So I don't know how they're going to do this, right? Apparently, there's been some conversations that the Taliban is going to secure the airport while the U.S. leaves. Maybe, I guess. Did you see the video that I played? Do you think that they are capable of that, or that they have any interest in that? I'm not so sure. Don M911 says, hi, Rob. Been watching since the Chauvin trial. Finally joined Locals. Welcome, Don. Grateful that you're here. I appreciate everything you do. 9/11 was my 16th birthday. Wow. That's it. That's great. So your birthday's coming up. Not a good birth date, but happy birthday to you when it comes up. And the events that day are why I joined the Army and served 10 years. Sickening to me, this is. ISIS-K took credit for yesterday's attack, but what are your thoughts on the Taliban releasing the ISIS fighters from the Bagram prison? Are those forces aligned in an enemy of my enemy is my friend arrangement? Is the Taliban playing both sides of the fence on this? So probably, right? And that's sort of the point that I was making about, two feathers on the same bird, or two sides of the same coin. The Taliban has been fighting against America for 20 years. 20 years in Afghanistan. They're going to be friendly with America now? I mean, America's responsible, presumably, for wiping out their brothers and sisters, their children, their mothers and fathers, right? It's a war. And the purpose of war is to kill your enemy. So the U.S. has been killing their enemy, and the U.S. has been killing the Taliban. And the idea that the Taliban now are going to wake up and go, well, look, we want to be recognized on the international stage, and that we're suddenly going to, moderate and become this new force that recognizes gender equity in our ranks is insane, even though the Biden administration is talking about that. It's lunacy. It's not going to happen ever. These are people that are ideologically aligned. They are, embedded, their ideology is embedded in their lives. And so the idea that they're suddenly going to, interface with American democracy is kind of a joke. The ISIS-K also, and ISIS, has been of the same posture, right? They've been doing the same thing, fighting against the same enemy, the same cause. So why would they not be aligned? It seems obvious to me. So every time that the White House comes out and they talk about their new Taliban partners, you go, have you been asleep for the last 20 years? What the hell have you been doing? All right. Kareem says, could it be that this, like COVID-19, is part of their agenda for something else? A lot of people are speculating, that this is a distraction away from other things. I don't know. I mean, I think that this is just colossal incompetence. I haven't seen any evidence of anything else nefarious going on, but a lot of people are wondering, how can something be so poorly managed? How can something be botched so badly? It almost feels like it has to be coordinated because nobody can be that dumb. Are you serious? All of these people who've been in government for this long, they're all this incompetent. Nobody was in the Oval Office. Nobody was in the Situation Room with Joe Biden and said, hey, morons, guys, going to be a problem. And then and then it's a problem. And then the response to the problem, which has been my biggest criticism this whole time. Yes, I understand you can make a military miscalculation. I understand you can make a bad leadership decision at the outset of a crisis. But then the response to the mistake has been horrible. And it's not getting any better. Sergeant Bob is here, says, just a thought. The U.S. government says it is communicating with U.S. citizens via text, email, etc. Imagine plugins to keep the devices charged are not easily found. Has to be a problem. Yeah. So saying that electricity, right? If the whole city is in catastrophe, then yeah, they probably don't have good Wi-Fi, good cell service, good internet connections, good electricity. Did you see you saw some of the videos? It's a mess. It's a war zone. Miss Danny says, Rob, something that's not talked about, starting to be addressed now, is the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. It's a real mess there as well. Yeah, we played a video of that yesterday. Many Afghans, as well as many foreigners too far from Kabul in order to get there, are going through the Pakistani border. Seems there has been death, some people there. Yeah, I think that is accurate. Yesterday on the show, we had some video from that border town, and I was showing the crowd size, just so people could see how much everybody's sort of being funneled into these bottlenecks. And there are bodies, just piled into each other. And we heard earlier in last week that there were people who were even being crushed and suffocated to death. And they were dying from the pressure, right? People are pushing them into the barricades to try to breach these barriers. And the people were dropping dead or falling from heat exhaustion and things like that because of the pressure. And so you can imagine that densely compact people, and some explosive goes off there. It's horrendous. And so yeah, there's a humanitarian crisis. People are going to be trying to get out of Afghanistan any way they can. Thunder 7 says, I don't know, Rob, something about the whole suicide vest, 13 Marines killed story doesn't make sense. This is what we've been told. U.S. military left behind 85 million in brand new, I think it's billion. I think it's 85B with a B. They released the dogs, ISIS, out of prison. They warned that an ISIS attack was imminent. The attacks happened, and now they gave the names of the U.S. citizens they left behind the Taliban. Meanwhile, Taliban eating ice cream, mocking Biden, scolding Twitter for banning Trump. Are we watching a show? What is actually real? That's from Thunder 7. That's kind of my point, right? How can they botch every single element of this entire operation? And then when they screw it up even more. And continue to do so. It's kind of shocking, but it actually doesn't surprise me. I've been saying Joe Biden's incompetent for years. Bumalickit says, where are the squad, the Hollywood, BLM? Their silence is so deafening. No single comment from them. Even FB is so quiet. Must be Facebook. Yeah, you noticed that, right? Really quiet. They're all talking about COVID and masks and, critical race theory and all sorts of voting bills and things like that. What's your opinion on your president that you were so behind recently? Not looking so good. Sergeant Bob says, Miss Psaki should be given her press updates from the Kabul runway. Maybe then she'll have a clue. Word games are shameful. That's from Sergeant Bob. Kenny 1B says, Rob, I understood that you really dislike the intelligence apparatus, but our tactical military intelligence is actually pretty good. Unfortunately, tactical military intelligence uses much of the same infrastructure as geopolitical and counterintelligence collection. Yeah, look, I really don't like much of our intelligence apparatus. I'm not real sure what they do. Most of the things that we see from them are not good. So I'm not real sure what use they have. I am recognizing while I say that there are many, many good people in our country, many good people in our government, in the tactical military intelligence, in the intelligence communities who are doing good work and very good people. But institutionally, I think that there are some pretty significant problems that are worth calling out. And that's why we do it here. But I take your point there, Kenny 1B. Want to Know says Chuck Norris showed them how to exit an airport on a motorcycle. Yeah, Chuck Norris has some good escape plans. DG McBride says, what distinguished member of our Washington, D.C. brain trust was clever enough to outsource our security to the Taliban and then dox Americans by providing the Taliban their information, location, and all of that? Is it now permissible to communicate with an identified terrorist organization? Well, DG McBride, those are our international partners now. A couple months ago, they were our enemies in the Taliban and, international terrorists, people who were, beheading people and things like that. But now, international partners. We might have diplomatic relationships with them because they have a lot of leverage and the United States does not. We have former LEO says they should place GPS markers on every structure that had Taliban armed people entering and exiting. On the way out the door, when the last aircraft is left, which should be protected by every drone in that part of the world, should level every building that was used by the Taliban. Well, see, I think the problem with that, former LEO, is that if the Taliban have 2,000 hostages that are American citizens that America is very interested in, the Taliban just says, okay, well, we just start beheading people every day. We just take the Christians. Get the Christians out here, we just start beheading them one by one. Every day. And they have a whole big boatload of people because the U.S. is stranding them. Let's see what else. We have Sharon Quidney says, it's becoming increasingly apparent that this, quote, incompetence has been totally planned. If you were sickened by Kamala the Cackler laughing at people begging for water, just imagine what will happen when she is shown pictures of dead bodies. They'll probably cut to her crying from laughing so hard. She is a pretty calloused woman. There's no question about that. Very, very phony and highly calloused. Let's see. Kareem says, maybe no one subscribed to your clips because we all watch the entire live show every day. That's probably true. I think that's probably accurate. No, I'm making an announcement to people who are here on the show. So the people who want the clips, who don't watch the show, don't know about the announcement. It's a catch-22 there, Kareem. Thanks for calling that out. We have B. Brave says, I anticipate the Biden regime staying after August 31st, that all who wanted to leave had the opportunity. Saying that, yeah. I think that's right. They're going to say, well, look, we told them they had 14 days to get out of there. They didn't, even though we told them to come to the airport, then said, don't come to the airport, and send us a text. Oh, I checked my, Jen Psaki's there. Oh, you didn't text me. Oh, I didn't get it. Sorry. Deadmau5 says, Psaki is straight out of Orwell's essay, Politics and English Language. Quote from that says, objective considerations of contemporary phenomena compel the conclusion that success or failure in competitive activities exhibits no tendency to be commensurate with innate capacity, but that a considerable element of the unpredictable must invariably be taken into account. That is a hell of a sentence right there. My goodness, that's a hell of a sentence. Yeah, well, Jen Psaki's pretty good at that. They have very good ways to manipulate the language, and they bifurcate things in a way that it's hard to tell what's happening. But they're dividing this between military ops and state ops, but they're just going to come out. And most people don't know the difference, right? Most people can't name who their senator is. So all they hear is, oh, that person from Joe Biden's team said they're going to get all the Americans out. So that's what I heard. That's great. And you say, yeah, do you know how they're going to do that? They're going to, I guess, give the Taliban a seat at the UN, and we're going to start negotiating with them or something. So do you think that's going to happen anytime soon? Do you think that's a reason? Would you buy a plane ticket from that administration on that basis? Probably not. But it is clever, and it's probably going to work to some extent. Kenny 1B says, the Taliban want the U.S. military and all foreigners gone. Appears they, for the most part, will agree to get them out of the region. Last thing the Taliban wants is the U.S. military returning. At the same time, the Taliban are not disciplined, and small groups are likely to take hostages for ransom. Right, that's the other thing, too, is... do we believe that there's going to be consistency from the Taliban, like they're going to be able to control their ranks with the same rigor and discipline that the U.S. military has, and that they're going to follow those same structures and protocols? No, absolutely not. We've seen them. They're going to play bumper cars. We have Jupa says, have you read into Glenn Beck, the Nazarene Fund, along with other organizations, securing something like 400 interpreters, Christians, children, only to be turned away by the 82nd Airborne Commander at the direction of the U.S. ambassador. No, I did not hear that. If they really wanted to get people out, they would have let them in. Now you have the Bratz doll in Congress, AOC, blaming Trump for not pre-evacuating people. Is she doing that? Haven't heard much from her either lately. All of them are pretty quiet. I did see Glenn Beck was organizing that fund. I did not know that a U.S. ambassador denied him access to something, but okay. Brad Thorne says, I saw that we have at least one carrier group in the area actively flying sorties. I haven't heard anyone talking about this fact that we have our jets in the region assisting. Seems like everyone is focused on our ground game. Are we conveniently forgetting about the technology that we have in the air? Seems like they could pull the trigger on some air support and scare the bad guys on the ground straight for a few days. Then, along with the government's quarrel with Blackwater, makes me question, their intentions. Good comment there, Brad Thorne. Let's see what this says. Pull this up here, turn that screen off and see what this is showing us. But it's a good comment. I think that my same point from previous time stands. The idea would be that, okay, so here's what we've got. Based at the Marine Corps, embarked to Ronald Reagan, Royal Mace Strike Fighter Squadron, Diamondbacks, Marine Corps, Eagles. Yeah, so it looks like a lot of stuff is over there. Yeah, there's no question about the fact that the United States military has massive amounts of force projection, right? The U.S., I think if there was enough willpower, they could go in there and probably take control of the whole situation. Now, that might result in massive casualties because if the Taliban really does have lists of Americans along with all the biometric data that they got from our equipment that we left over there, then they can just go and scan everybody and just start rounding up, external Americans who have been stranded there. And so even if you come with all the force in the world, they have a massive bucket of hostages that they can use that really adjust the dynamic of power dramatically. And what can you do about that? All right, great question. Thanks for sharing that article. Let's see what else we've got. Kenny1B says, the difference between the Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda is like the difference between BLM, Antifa, the Black Panthers, etc. So kind of distinctions without a difference. Pro Bono says, is Pakistan funding the Taliban? How are they getting backed? Well, the U.S. government is going to be funding the Taliban now. They already are. They got $85 billion worth of gear. Lorenzo Greasy Bottom says we should have used a different method of engagement with the Afghanistan people. Not going to put that one on the screen, but that's what he was saying, more or less. News Now says, my daughter decided not to play The Sims and is on Xbox instead. That's very nice. News Now Wyoming, very, very nice parent, was going to let daughter play Sims. She's on Xbox instead. Well, so News Now gets to join us, which is even better. Worked out for everybody. Good to see you. Want to Know says, Taliban actually wants a banker with a lot of money for all the thousands of ATM hostages they have. The U.S. is just going to start delivering probably pallets of cash. We know what that looks like. No Name here says, does anyone have a thought that the Afghans have been fighting for thousands of years about what kind of outcome could be expected? Yeah, I heard a great pithy phrasing for what Afghanistan means for people who are not in Afghanistan. For people outside of Afghanistan, like China, Russia, the U.S., and many of the other countries that are sort of, kicking the can around in the Middle East, that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires, right? And it's this battleground of empires that rather than China fighting the U.S. or the Russians fighting the U.S., everybody fights in Afghanistan. It's a base for proxy wars where the major superpowers of the world can go in there and sort of have these little skirmishes in this sandbox that nobody much cares about because it's been a war zone forever. And it's a very, very contested geopolitical region. So it actually comes with some benefits if you control that. It's like a board game. If you're playing Risk, you want to capture certain areas of the game. It's kind of a nice piece. China doesn't want to go to war with the U.S. over any of that, or Russia, or any of those major superpowers. But they do kind of want to test each other a little bit. And so Afghan is that little piece of land that captures a lot of that attention. Interesting way to think about it. And yeah, it's been that way for a long time. Not just in modern history, like historically. All the empires, all of the ancients, it's been that way for a long time. John Delar says, when I need a pick-me-up, I watch your videos. Well, thank you, John Delar. I appreciate that. That's a nice compliment because I have people that I watch when I kind of need something like that too. That's a really nice compliment. Thank you for saying that. All right, we got another one that's loading up here. Says, the last villain says, do you think the Second Amendment would have helped every woman in Afghanistan with a handgun? I think the Second Amendment always helps because you have a fundamental right to self-defense, to preserve your life. And yeah, if the Taliban came around the U.S., yeah, they'd have a little bit of a difficult time beheading people because everybody would be armed up. Just, oh, no, that's not going to happen right here. Bye, right? And the first thing that often happens when you have these tyrannical overthrows is they take all the guns. Mustang Jeff says, what will the Biden admin say when doxxed Americans are suddenly executed by the Taliban? Probably something like they should have left earlier, or maybe they should have responded to our emails or something. I don't know. Want to Know says, do you think the Kamala speech on women's rights and LGBTQ plus Ellie Expeditious was a good speech to give at this time, or was this something that she could get away with? I think a lot. So first of all, I didn't see her speech. I'm not sure what she said or what she was talking about, but a lot of these things I think have been distractions. We saw that Joe Biden, I think, took a knee the other day, and then he came out and he wanted to talk about COVID, and then wanted to talk about infrastructure and all of those things, and then took a knee. And they're doing some provocative things because they would do anything to take your attention off of Afghanistan, which of course is not going to happen. Mustang Jeff says, the Abraham Lincoln left San Diego yesterday. Wonder where they are headed. Probably a lot of new geopolitical positioning happening right now. Osak says, Rob, who is the Afghan government that U.S. recognizes as legit? Well, they're talking about the Taliban. I mean, there really is no Afghanistan government anymore. The president fled. The country's leaderless. It's basically the Taliban. I mean, they are the government. When the White House talks about our partners, they're talking about the Taliban. Let's see what else. Red-pilled convict says, many of those trapped have no way of getting the State Department forms. Government says no forms mean you want to stay, right? And they don't know the numbers. We heard from Jake Sullivan saying that, we just don't know who's there. We're the State Department, but we don't know anything. Because when they get there, they don't tell us. When they leave, they don't tell us. When they get blown up in explosions that we are sort of responsible for, they don't tell us. So it's just kind of a free-for-all over there. And, yeah, not much compassion for them there. Cats59 says, Rob, did you see that tutored special ops going by Project Pineapple are the ones who went out and brought in those 500 people the day of the bombing? I saw that headline, Cats, as I was skidding in here to do the show, so I didn't read that. But I did see something about there were some people, some special ops that essentially went in sort of covertly and rescued a bunch of people. Let's see. Rob, you keep mentioning $85 billion of military equipment. That is the total amount the U.S. has spent since 2001. In 2020, $3 million of new equipment was given to the Afghan army. Well, I saw something about that. Let's see if I can pull that up. So because that, $3 million, that doesn't sound right, because we went through the list of all sorts of different things. And let's take a look. See if I can pull this up, clarify some of this a little bit. Yeah, so here's an article that I got from Forbes, just taking a look at this. I want to make sure I get this right because I certainly don't want to be giving out bad information. Staggering costs. U.S. left military equipment behind. Here's the numbers. And the U.S. provided an estimated $83 billion worth of training and equipment since 2001. This year, military aid was $3 billion alone. So I think we're just an order of magnitude off, right? This is from Forbes. Government Accountability Office, dead leak, $174 million on drones. I mean, we've talked about this on this channel, right? I mean, they have Black Hawk helicopters and things like that. So it's certainly more than 3 million. It's in the billions, I believe. So thank you for flagging that. Just glad we got to check that. We have see you tomorrow, Rob, but you will not see me. Look who's here. They're RSVPing for the Watching the Watchers monthly local meetup, but look who this is. It's the FBI. It's the secret FBI. They're gonna. That's okay. Come and talk to us. We'll be here. We're good people. Come check in, FBI. We have some questions for you. Actually, I'd like to talk to you. We'll see you there. Osak says, "Hey Rob, the only good to come away from this is now the Dem have no grounds for gun restriction." Yeah, that's true. They're going to do that anyways, though. I think the real big silver lining in this whole thing is that people are recognizing how grossly incompetent our government is from top to bottom. And something like this is going to really help people recognize that. And the echoes are going to reverberate into all the different facets of our lives. We're going to realize that even our revered military leaders, these very smart, Oxford-educated intelligentsia people, are radically incompetent. And so if they can't even get control of a situation like Afghanistan, if they can't even get control of a situation like on the border, which involves just like physical things, how are they going to get control of a virus? How are they going to get control of an entire population when they're trying to lock you down and steal away your liberties? It's going to be difficult for them to do that when people are recognizing now what a joke the government is. And so people are seeing this, they're waking up a little bit, and that's not a bad thing. It's tragic that it has to be this way, but that itself is not a bad thing. Some other super chats came in. Joe Sosnowski's over here says, wake up, Joe Biden, because he's asleep at the house. Good to see you, Joe. Thank you for that. We have Eddie Oliver says, ISIS is more conservative than the Taliban, believe it or not. As far as the interfaith relationship, think Catholics and Protestants. Well, it's a great example. It's a great analogy, yeah. Right, so the Catholics and the Protestants have more in common with each other than they would with the Taliban. Just like the Taliban and ISIS have more in common than they would with the United States. So maybe their interests are more aligned than the U.S. should take for granted. The U.S. is considering them to be our partners. It's not such a reality, is it? We have Michael MJL says, aside from drug money, Afghanistan was a Washington, D.C. money laundering op for woke Inc. nation building. Feminized government military doesn't play well there. No, it doesn't. And for some reason, some people in this administration were speculating that it would. I mean, we played some lady on this channel, I couldn't believe it, who was reading very angrily. I mean, she looked like she was mad, at the Taliban specifically, because they were not being very diverse gender speaking wise. They were not inclusive. And so it was from the State Department, an official lady, I forget what her name was, reading a statement. We played it on the show. Very mad. Good luck to her on that. Eddie Oliver says, it's easy to get a suicide vest past security when it's provided by the Taliban. Yeah, it's a great point, Eddie. They're not checking too much. They go, oh, yeah, that looks like it's strapped on perfectly. No, the Taliban says, excuse me, sir, do you have a suicide vest? He says, yes, I do. Oh, let me take a look at it. Oh, yeah, that's connected here. Yeah, you got the appropriate C4, the appropriate explosives, no problem. Turn around. Yeah, it looks great. Head on through. Go for it. Good luck. See you in the afterlife. Praise be to Allah. All right. So that's maybe how that went. I don't know. Thank you all for the super chats and the support on YouTube. Shout outs to everybody chatting away over on Locals. We got Be Brave over there. Miss Donnie, Want to Know. Several others sent in some great chat questions today on the program. And so all of those came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Thank you for all of your support. All right. We're going to jump into our next segment. We're going to talk about SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, and see what they're up to, because an interesting ruling came out. The Supreme Court of the United States blocks Joe Biden on the eviction moratorium. We've been following this case for some time. A little bit of backstory on this. Of course, we know we're in the middle of COVID. It's season 2 now. It's 2021. And so we've been through this game before. We've seen these shows. They're pretty terrible. But one interesting thing happened in this season. The CDC continued to extend the eviction moratorium. We know that many people were sort of had to be locked down in their homes, and some people lost their jobs. The economy was in a little bit of a questionable territory last year during the head of the coronavirus. And so now that some of that has been kind of settled, the vaccine's available now, things are opening up to some degree before they shut them back down again. People have been speculating about, well, what about the people who have been living in other people's homes and not paying their rents? We recall that back during the height of the pandemic, the CDC came out and said they cannot be thrown out. It's too dangerous. There's too much coronavirus out there. So we can't throw people out of their homes. What kind? Or are you a monster? Are you a Republican? How could you do something so evil? And so, that didn't happen. The CDC said, no, you're going to make sure that they stay in their houses. National emergency. We're the CDC. We're going to scare the hell out of everybody, and you're going to comply. And so people did that. Then they extended it. Then they extended it again and again and again and again. And finally, the Supreme Court took a case and listened to an argument from the Alabama Association of Realtors, who said, listen, we represent a lot of homeowners that actually have homes, and they have people living in their property. That's their private property, which is something that's guaranteed by our laws under the Constitution of this United States. Very, very important concept that we have here. So Alabama realtors, they file a lawsuit and they say that's our property. Those people are not paying their bills. We have a right to exercise our property rights and throw them out. Well, this whole case was challenged in the federal courts. The federal courts, the CDC responded, and they're telling us through Health and Human Services, they were telling the realtors, that's too bad. Your private property, that's true. It is yours, but not for the time being, not for the foreseeable future. That house, it's our house because the CDC said so. Because of the coronavirus, because of Delta, because things are so scary out there, we caused a situation where we've got something like 3 million people who may be homeless if we actually throw them out. So we caused this problem, we let them stay there, and now you want to do something about it, and we can't let you embarrass us. And so what the CDC did is they extended it again and again and again. The case went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, listen, CDC, you are not a legislative body. You're a part of the executive branch. And so because we don't live in a dictatorial, tyrannical, insane asylum, you don't get to just on your own voluntarily change private property rules in this country and just take other people's property away from them willy-nilly, however you see fit, and justify it on the back of the coronavirus. The court gave them a lot of leeway to extend it and extend it and extend it, but said enough already. And what did Joe Biden do? Joe Biden said, well, we're just going to do it anyways. We're going to extend it anyways. And the CDC did that. Now, the Supreme Court was not happy about that. We're going to go through that today. They picked up this case immediately, very quickly. I thought that maybe they were going to kick this can down the road and maybe we wouldn't see something until next year. Not the case at all. Supreme Court didn't like it that Joe Biden kind of thumbed his nose in their faces and directly was out of compliance with what the Supreme Court had hinted at previously. And so now they responded. Axios gives us a headline now that we have that backdrop. They say the Supreme Court blocks Biden's COVID eviction ban. On Thursday night, 6-3 ruling, there was a moratorium on evictions that no longer is standing. Roughly 3.5 million people across the U.S. said they faced eviction in the next 2 months, according to Census Bureau data from mid-August. So that's a lot of people. State of play, it says the courts previously ruled that the administration could not extend the ban. This was instituted due to the coronavirus, passed July 31st without explicit congressional authorization. But after the protests, the CDC did it anyways. They extended the ban through August 3rd. Case went up to the Supreme Court after the Alabama realtors sued. Justice Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan all dissented in the opinion. So let's go through it. It's not super long. It's 16 pages, and it's split relatively evenly. And we can fly through this pretty quickly so we can see what's going on here. And I want to point this out because this is a direct split. It's a 6-3 opinion. It's the 6 so-called conservative judges versus the 3 liberal judges. This is an issue on public policy. So now we're talking specifically about how they are interpreting the law as it applies to a very pressing public issue. What do we do about these 3.5 million people who presumably have been living in other people's property for free? The CDC said it's not your property anymore. It's theirs. It's ours. And we're going to continue to use it. What do we do with those 3 people? Kind of 3 million people. It's kind of a big question for the court to decipher. And so we're going to pay attention to both sides of this and see how the legal analysis works. Here, let's start off from the top. We've got the Supreme Court of the United States. This is a pure per curiam opinion. And what that means, you can see that here, is it's the opinion of the court. They're not going to label this to somebody or attach this to one particular justice. So here's the picture of the court. You can see we've got the 6 judges that are in the majority opinion. I have them highlighted here in green. Amy Coney Barrett, Gorsuch, Roberts, we have Alito, and we have Kavanaugh, and we have Thomas, all here in green, and they are part of the majority. So let's see if we can piece together what's going on here. The CDC director imposed a nationwide moratorium that prevented people from being evicted due to COVID-19 transmission. Alabama Association of Realtors said this is unlawful, not allowed to do that. District Court said that we're not going to make a decision while there's an appeal, and now what they're saying is we're vacating the stay and rendering the judgment enforceable. The district court produced a comprehensive opinion after careful review of the record, makes it clear that the applicants are certain to succeed on the merit on the basis of their argument that the CDC exceeded its authority. So you see that? So they're basically saying that the Alabama Association of Realtors, if they take this thing up, they're going to win because it's so problematic what the CDC did. It says here, instead, the CDC has imposed a nationwide moratorium on evictions in reliance on a decades-old statute that authorizes it to implement its measures like fumigation and pest extermination. The court says it strains credulity to believe that this statute grants the CDC the sweeping authority that it asserts. So that's a big line there. Nationwide mandate moratorium in reliance on a decades-old statute. The decades-old statute is talking about fumigation and pest extermination. So the court is saying the CDC is relying on something that is basically irrelevant to take away people's property rights. And that it strains credulity that they're doing that. All right. In March 2020, Congress passed the coronavirus aid, other relief programs. They entered a new eviction moratorium that expired in July. Congress did not renew it. That's a big thing. Okay. Congress passed this bill and they did not renew it. They said that further action wasn't needed. So the CDC decided to do what Congress did not. The new administratively imposed moratorium went further than its statutory predecessor, covered all residential properties nationwide, and even imposed criminal penalties on violators. We talked about that. We went through the order from Rochelle Walensky, and we read through it line by line, and it said that if you threw people out of your property because it's your house and they're not paying their rent, they're going to charge you with a crime for that as a landlord. And that was from the CDC director. Nobody voted on that. That didn't go through the legislatures. That didn't go through Congress. Congress voted for it in March and then didn't renew it. So Congress sort of said, well, we guess we don't need that anymore. CDC's moratorium was originally slated to expire on December 31st, 2020. Folks, that is almost 9 months ago. Congress extended it for 1 month as a part of the COVID Act. As the new deadline approached, CDC again took matters into its own hands, extended the moratorium through March, then again through June, then again through July. Congress didn't pass anything. It expired. The bills that Congress passed expired. CDC relied on different authority. They looked over to the Health Act. Says here that the Health and Human Services is authorized to make and enforce such regulations as his judgment seems necessary to prevent transmission of communicable diseases. For the purpose of carrying this out, so this is the statute that the CDC is relying on. CDC is looking at this law, comes from Section 361, says, look, Surgeon General, along with HHS, we can do what we need to do in order to prevent the spread of communicable diseases from one state into another. For the purposes of carrying out and enforcing these regulations, Surgeon General may provide for such things. Let's see what they have in this list. This is what the law says that the CDC Surgeon General can do. Fumigation, disinfection, sanitation, pest extermination, destruction of animals, articles to be found infected or contaminated, dangerous infection to human beings, other measures, etc. Did you see? I just read that. That's from a court opinion, a legal document. Did you see anything that says that you can't throw non-paying delinquent tenants out of your private property in that list? I didn't see it. They also talk about CFR, originally passed in 1944. That provision is not invoked. It's about the sale of animals and those things. Realtor associations and rental property managers in Alabama and Georgia, they sued. They said that this is not appropriate, and the court declined to vacate the stay at a lower level. The moratorium from the CDC expired on July 31st, and we know that there was an opinion that came out from the prior ruling. This is the part where that Joe Biden actually just didn't follow the ruling. Justice Kavanaugh issued an opinion, said that they agreed with the district court that the CDC's moratorium exceeded its statutory authority. The court already opined on this issue. Said that no, the last extension that bumped this out to July was basically unconstitutional. But because it's just a few weeks away, we're going to let you do it until Congress can get back involved. Judge Kavanaugh wrote that. Judge Kavanaugh, when this got on his desk, it was a split decision, and he sided with allowing the extension to stay. He said, okay, look, we're going to let it go to July 31st, but that's it. Don't ask for another extension, because even on this one, you're outside of your constitutional authority. You're relying on this law that doesn't apply at all, and you've been extending this thing indefinitely, even though Congress has not approved any of the funds. So Rochelle Walensky, the CDC, the Surgeon General, they're all just passing laws effectively. These are orders and extensions and moratoriums and whatever, but they're acting like congressional bodies and they're taking those duties away from Congress. If Congress doesn't want to throw 3.5 million people out of their houses, they're entitled to pass a bill and do it. But they're not going to do it. So they're using the CDC, the executive branch, which is the inappropriate branch to do this type of work, to do it because they don't want to do it. They don't want to be saddled with that. So that got extended again to July 31st. 3 days later, after it expired, they did it again. Judge Kavanaugh said, don't do it. You're exceeding your statutory authority. They did it anyways. With the moratorium once again in place, the plaintiffs returned back to the district court. And let's see what happens. Having passed through the lower courts, the district court concluded that its stay is no longer justified. Let's see. The court says the applicants not only have a substantial likelihood of winning, it is difficult to imagine them losing. He's talking about the Alabama realtors. Says the government contends that the first sentence of the law gives the CDC broad authority to do whatever it wants, that whatever it deems necessary to control COVID-19, including issuing the moratorium. So we just read that. The same law that said fumigation and pesticides and getting rid of infected animals and those things, CDC says that is so broad that basically they can do whatever they want. Supreme Court says not so fast. The second sentence informs that grant of authority by illustrating exactly what you can do. Inspecting, fumigation, sanitation, pest extermination, blah, blah, blah. These measures directly relate to preventing the interstate spread of disease. Why? How do they do that? By identifying, isolating, and destroying the disease itself. Those things are very narrowly tailored. They're closely related to that. The goal of the CDC, don't let diseases spread. So you're empowered as the Surgeon General with the CDC to now effectuate and accomplish those goals, which means you can exterminate things and prevent animals from, spreading and eliminate contaminated areas. Okay. Sounds good. That's fine. The CDC is reading that. That means we can do whatever we need to do to stop the spread of communicable diseases. The court says no, because it says specifically in the law, this is what you can do. So don't read it broadly. They say the CDC's moratorium, on the other hand, relates to interstate infection far more indirectly. It's not connected to fumigation and those things. If evictions occur, yeah, some subset of tenants might move from one state to another, and some subset of that group, the people who moved, might do so while they're infected with COVID. But this downstream connection between the eviction and the interstate spread is different from the direct targeting of the disease that is authorized by the statute. If you read both sentences together rather than the first one by itself, it is a stretch, the court says, to maintain that the law gives the CDC authority to impose this eviction moratorium, right? And then they go on. They're just demolishing the CDC here. They say, look, even if it were unclear, even if we read that law and it was ambiguous, the sheer scope of what the CDC is claiming to do is basically insane. These vast economic and political significance. They're saying the power of the CDC is claiming here is insane. At least 80% of the country, including between 6 and 7 million tenants, are at risk of eviction. That falls within the moratorium. While the parties dispute the financial burden on landlords, Congress has provided nearly $50 billion in emergency assistance. And the issue at stakes are not merely financial. The moratorium invades onto an area of particular domain of state law, the landlord-tenant relationship. Congress is responsible for these things, and what the CDC is trying to do is encroach on the powers of the state. The government's read of the CDC law would give the CDC a breathtaking amount of authority. Yeah, whatever they want if they got their way. It's hard to see what measures this interpretation would place outside of the CDC's reach. If we read it the way the CDC wants us to read it, they can do whatever they want. Because I've been screaming about this for well over a year now, that there's no limiting principle on what it takes to stop COVID. It can be anything. As we saw, they locked us in our houses, folks, in most parts of this country, so that you can't even go outside because of your death viral particles coming out of your mouth or something. And they justified that on the back of the virus, of the CDC. Because it's so scary and dangerous that the government can do whatever you want, whatever they want, including taking your property away from you. No limiting principle there. The court said, yeah, if we gave it to you, CDC, you can do whatever you want. And that's insane because we live in America, not China. The government has identified no limit beyond the requirement that the CDC deem the measure necessary. That's it. That's all. If the CDC says it's necessary, that's it. This claim of expansive authority is unprecedented. Since that provision enacted in 1944, no regulation has even begun to approach that size or the scope of the eviction moratorium. It's further amplified by the CDC's decision to make it criminal, imposing penalties of $250,000 fine or 1 year in jail. They say this law is a wafer-thin reed on which to rest such sweeping power. This is your little tyrannical dictators. This is the argument that they're making. They're trying to seize control of all the different levers of power using these little rules. Well, the law says I'm the director of the CDC, so I can do what's necessary to solve the virus. And if people need to be divested of their private property, so be it, because we're saving lives. If you need to mask if we're going to mandate that your kid masks up all day, we're saving lives. If we're going to force you to take a jab, it's because we're saving lives. And it's all on this basis. It's necessary to accomplish their goals. The Supreme Court said no, that's insane, because it is insane. Now, you're going to see the liberal justices here to go the other direction, but let's finish this up. The equities, the court says, does not justify depriving the applicants of a judgment in their favor. The moratorium put the applicants, along with millions of landlords, at risk of irreparable harm by depriving them of rent payments with no guarantee of eventual recovery. Despite the CDC's determination that landlords should bear a significant financial cost of the pandemic, many landlords have modest means. Yeah, Rochelle Walensky, you don't get to decide who pays for this and dump it on landlords. Preventing them from evicting tenants who breach their leases intrudes on one of the most fundamental elements of property ownership, the right to exclude. That's how you know it's your property, because you can say it's mine and not yours. Otherwise, it's communal property. If it's everybody's property, it's not yours. The right to exclude is a very important right that's been well delineated in the law, including in the Supreme Court. As the harm to applicants increased, the government interests have decreased. Since the district court entered its stay, the government had 3 additional months to solve this problem. They didn't do it. Whatever interest the government had in maintaining the moratorium's original end date to ensure the orderly administration of these programs has diminished. Congress was on notice that further extension would almost surely require new legislation, yet it failed to act in the several weeks leading up to the expiration. Congress didn't do anything about it. That's why you had AOC with her mask off, hanging out with Rashida Tlaib. No, who was that? Who was out there? No, that wasn't Rashida. She's also in the crew. The other gal. I can't remember her name. But they were out there on the grounds of the Capitol screaming out from the rooftops about this thing. They're in Congress. Cori Bush is who I'm thinking of. Cori Bush was the other lady. He says, we're out here just fighting for something. We need somebody to act. And I'm thinking, you're Congress people. You can go in there and vote on this thing. You didn't do it. You just used the tyrannical CDC and the executive branch to pass along your unconstitutional extensions in direct violation of what the Supreme Court intimated. They say it is indisputable that the public has a strong interest in stopping COVID, but our system does not permit agencies to act unlawfully, even in pursuit of desirable ends. It is up to Congress, not the CDC, to decide whether the public interest merits further action here. If a federally imposed eviction moratorium is to continue, Congress must specifically authorize it. Granted by the Supreme Court of the United States. Good opinion. Very good opinion. I've been unhappy with the Supreme Court in a lot of these things, but very good opinion. You know, the same concept came up with elections. Did you see what they're doing here? It's a separation of powers argument. It's saying, look, the CDC is doing stuff that the Constitution does not empower them to do. We do not live in a dictatorship. They are not allowed to do that. Stuff like that has to go through Congress. That's the appropriate venue. Same stuff happened with the election. The legislature is the appropriate body to maneuver the election rules. It's been delegated by the Constitution. But when the states did it, when the state executive branch changed the rules through the Secretary of State, when we saw the courts modify the election rules outside of the legislature, Those were all on state levels, local levels. And the Supreme Court didn't even care. This is happening on a federal level, which is why they care. So we'll see if this extends down to the states at some point. Interesting. Let's see here. The dissent, we're going to take a look at Justice Breyer. Justice Breyer here, the Democrats are very unhappy with Justice Breyer. They want him to step down and resign so Joe Biden can appoint somebody else up there who's not as old. Quite frankly, though, Justice Breyer, I think, is doing a tremendous job. I think he's got a lot of life left in him, probably another decade or so. So we wish him a very long and continued seat on the court. And he's got a nice dissent here. Let's take a look at it. So he wrote the dissent. You can see these are the three left-leaning judges. We've got Kagan over here. We've got Breyer over here and Sotomayor down here in the bottom right. And so they are dissenting from the opinion. We're going to go through this a little bit more quickly because it's not as interesting, but I wanted to show you basically why they're siding kind of with the CDC on this. They say, look, they've issued an order that temporarily prohibits some evictions from going on. Today, this is an emergency matter, and this is happening without full briefing or without argument. And therefore, that's why I dissent. Okay, so the dissent is really not about the underlying issue in as much as it is about the process through which the court came to this conclusion. So Justice Breyer sort of wanted to do what Joe Biden wanted to do, was to say, well, send that back down, go up to Court of Appeals. We're going to put it on the next court docket. We're going to brief the whole thing. We're going to have oral arguments. We're going to have a full day and then maybe we'll get a full opinion on this thing next year down the road, which is sort of what I was speculating, that this whole thing was going to get kicked around the docket for a long period of time, and that we might see it, seriously, like way down the road if the Supreme Court didn't do this. So the Supreme Court kind of did sort of just jump in here and take the case and said, oh, no, we're not going to go through that appeal process. Joe Biden said that they violated the Supreme Court's order previously because he wanted to buy time. He said, we might get another month. We might get another 2 months. We might get more time than that. And he was realistic that this could have gone a different direction. But the Supreme Court stood up and said, we do not like that at all. And so they just stepped in there, plucked this case out, and said, we're gonna issue a ruling on that. So Judge Breyer is unhappy about it. Says, no, we should have delayed this, kicked this down the road a lot more. Talks about what that means, right? Talks about some of the standards are why this should have been continued. Says first, it's not clear that the CDC lacks the power to issue its modified moratorium order. Says that this current order is more tailored than the other one because it's only for Delta and it doesn't apply to everybody. It only applies to like 90% of the people. We talked about that previously. We talked about one of the sort of escape hatches that the CDC was using here is to say, well, Judge, we're not doing the same thing that you told us we couldn't do. Judge Kavanaugh said, no, if you're going to do this again, you need congressional authorization. So what they did is they said, well, we're not going to do exactly that again. We're going to do something a little bit different. And we're just going to modify it to some degree. And therefore, it's not the same thing. So we're technically not violating the Supreme Court. And so that's the argument that Judge Breyer is making here, saying, well, it is different. It's actually even more tailored than the other one. And so we should give it a little bit of different consideration. Says the CDC modified its moratorium order. You can see some of the changes there. The statute's first sentence grants them. So they are, this is where he's going through the law. This is the law again about infection and fumigation. He says, we're going to look at the first sentence, that it's essential to control the outbreak of disease. Then he's going to go back and go through some other case law. The second sentence he's saying is giving some examples, but it's not limiting them. He says that the way that the majority of the court interprets this is, not accurate. The court must speak more clearly to authorize. Let's see what else we got. All right. Second, the balance of the equities. This is where you can see sort of how the legal reasoning changes. The balance of the equities strongly favors leaving the stay in place. The applicants say they've lost thousands of dollars, but Congress has already given them a bunch of money. Now he's saying, let's compare that, right? He's saying, let's compare and contrast the harms. Over here, we've got the CDC. They're showing us some very scary numbers. Look at these numbers. This is very scary over here. So we see a lot of spikes and waves and we're going back up again. So that's why when you balance the equities, when you say, what are these realtors? money, rent payment. There's a bucket of $45 billion over there. So they're going to get paid. They're going to be fine. And if you compare and contrast that with this scary chart, wow. Yeah. 38 million Americans have been sickened. 629,000 have died. So now you sort of compare and contrast private property rights versus human deaths. What kind of a person are you? You're going to throw your renters out so that they can go drop dead of COVID on the streets? What a monster. It's kind of what Judge Breyer was saying. Says, look back at the order's criteria. CDC only targets those who might be impacted, blah, blah, blah. The public interest is not favored by the spread of the disease. So that the CDC says that a surge of evictions is going to cause a lot of big problems. So the public interest, they say, strongly favors respecting the CDC, following whatever they tell you to do. Anything they say, gotta respect the CDC because they're trying to save lives. And that's why he dissents, says their answers impact the health of millions. We should not set aside the CDC's moratorium. I dissent. That's Judge Breyer. Human life, more important than property rights. And that, because of that, the CDC should be granted authority to do basically whatever it wants, whatever it deems necessary indefinitely without any oversight or control. That's the mindset. That's why the court's a powerful institution and needs to be protected and guarded. All right, let's see what we've got. Some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Before we jump into our last segment of the day, let's see what we've got here. Monster One says, why do people think the SCOTUS decision matters? This administration has already shown they have little regard for the court. SCOTUS has no enforcement mechanism, can do little if Democrats defy them. Maybe it's time for Republicans to start ignoring Roe versus Wade or other decisions they disagree with. P.S. When are we going to see you on Tim Pool? I love Tim Pool. I'd go on his show, no problem. Yeah, I don't know how to go about that. But he has some very interesting guests on his podcast. There's some good conversations on there. Who did I just listen to the other day? They had somebody on there. It was very interesting. I can't remember his name. But yeah, I'd love to. I need to start doing more of that. I really do like talking to people and having interviews with amazing people. I'd love that opportunity. But I am just sort of in this wave here at the firm. We're growing like crazy, and so I'm trying to button a bunch of stuff up, and it's taking up a lot of my time. But I'm working through it, and I'm going to be able to do more time. I think for Tim's, you got to travel to wherever he lives, and so. But I'd love that, right? If anybody knows how to do that, I'd be very open to that. Old as Dirt says the Lincoln is going South China Sea for a meetup with the UK flat top and another U.S. amphibious carrier for a show of force. That's from Old as Dirt. That's on the Exiting Afghanistan. Let's over here. That was from Edon Tess, but that was on the last segment. So over here, Mustang Jeff says, do you suppose SCOTUS is calling the admin on the repeated COVID hysteria coming from Fauci and co? I bet the admin ignores this decision too. Then the Dems will use this as an excuse to pack the Supreme Court. It's a good concept there, Mustang Jeff. And I thought that was a very nice triangulation by Joe Biden. Right? He couldn't look. Congress is not going to do anything about this because Congress doesn't want that political meatball. The executive branch, they're kind of the only people who had the political capital to do this thing. They did it. And it set them up for the debate, the conversation, the implication that the Supreme Court is biased. So they kicked this over to them and they said, look, if they're going to throw 3 million people out, make them do it. Don't make us do it. Pretty smart politically. Supreme Court did it. So I think the White House has strategized to this effect, right? Now, I don't know if they're going to go ahead and try to pack the court, but why wouldn't they? Everything else is problematic. They're right now. They're shifting the entire country. Why would they not try to do that right now? This is kind of their last hurrah, right? They're going to get blown out in 2022 and probably 2024. So this is the last opportunity to do it. And the Supreme Court just opened the door for them. So we'll see where that goes. News Now Wyoming says, when I was reading Breyer's opinion, it was almost as if I was watching qualified immunity get created all over again. The law doesn't say this. In fact, it says the complete opposite, but this is how we think it should be. It's just great. It's a great summation of a lot of judicial opinions anyways, News Now Wyoming. Yeah, well, yeah, I know that's what it says, but I'm going to twist myself into a pretzel and use all these obscure little citations in order to make the argument that I want to make. Happens a lot. Want to Know says, how can we all just pay the 80% like the government says landlords have to take? This sounds like discrimination to me. The 80%, I'm not sure what you're talking about, want to know. Soul Viking says, while some people lost sources of income and couldn't qualify for unemployment, such as small businesses, partners, and independent contractors, but a large percentage of the people not paying rent were receiving government funding in one manner or another with that sudden windfall of extra cash. Yeah, sick and wrong. Right. Yeah, look, you get unemployed, you go get state unemployment, you get the federal benefits that they're giving out for COVID, and you don't pay your rent. So you're living a pretty nice life, not working for 8, 9, 10 months. It's insane. All right. Let's see what else. Thunder7 says, this is great news. Another win for the Constitution, followed up with the win that when they ordered Trump's Remain in Mexico policy to remain in place. Then I remember some cases you spoke about with gun owner rights winning. What's happening? Give us your legal expertise. Is SCOTUS now functioning properly again? Are they applying the law correctly? So on this case, yes, they are. This is a very good opinion, a very good case, something that is legally accurate. It is connected to reality. Okay, you can take a look at Breyer's opinion and you can see that, right? He's making the same argument that there is really no limiting principle. If the CDC says that you have to, cut your left arm off in order to stop COVID from spreading, you got to do it because it's 50% less touching. So just slice your arm off and you're not going to touch. You're going to touch literally 50% of what you touched previously. It's a pretty good, don't tell her about that. I just made that up on the fly. Don't tell Fauci about that. A bunch of amputees in this country over COVID. Lunacy. All right. What else? We have here, Sharon Quinney says, first of all, there will never be an end to COVID scare, at least not as long as this regime is in power. It's a sure bet they'll remain in power by running the same game they did in 2020 with all the COVID variants. Secondly, it's amazing to me that the Supremes managed to stand up for somebody's rights and for what used to be called the Constitution, Big C, and what's left of it after having been shredded by this regime. Good to see you, Sharon. Let's see. We got Sergeant Bob says, an interesting statistic would be the number of routine evictions in non-COVID years. Lots of people are evicted as a normal course of law. Compare that to figures for the last year. Seems there's a labor shortage due to the free money being given out by the government. Why work if no rent needs to be paid? Yeah, go look around, right? There are help wanted signs all over the place. People don't want to work because they're getting paid not to. We have Spawn Dog says, the 3 justices who dissented should be removed immediately. Apparently, they don't have a clue on how our constitutional republic works. The CDC overstepped their bounds. And the 3 justices feel like that was just fine. They do. And they would vote that way in the future. And they would do that for virtually every bureaucrat. They love giant government authoritarian control because they get things done, right? If the CDC has unlimited power to stop COVID, well, they can make all the attempts in the world to stop COVID. They could act like Australia if they wanted to. Lock you in your homes, give you an hour of exercise a day, make you comply, send out the military, do whatever it takes. It's basically giving the CDC martial law powers, anything that's necessary. And you had 3 liberal judges who said, yeah, that sounds fair because COVID is so bad. Whew. Good thing we got Trump in there, isn't it? News Now Wyoming says, it will be interesting to see what happens. Appears to me there's going to be over 1 million empty houses, 3 million people. Those landlords are going to trade one deadbeat tenant for another landlord's tenant, or they will remain empty. Yeah, I'm very curious what that's going to do to the housing markets, right? The housing markets are sort of at all-time highs across the board. Like the stock market, they're just pumping money into everything. Everybody's going, oh, my housing prices are great. You go, okay. Yeah. Do you see what everything else costs? It's called inflation, right? Everything is getting more expensive. So, your 401k may look like it's doing gangbusters, but when you go to spend that money, everything costs more. So it's all relative. All right. Gail says the next attack on property rights is the right to renew legislation, which requires landlords to renew tenant leases except for cause. Already passed in Albany, New York, coming to Tompkins. Then all they will have to do is declare that non-payment of rent is not cause for non-renewal. Yeah, man. I was having a conversation with my friend who is into real estate, right? And he wants to sort of go into that space. And I was telling him about all this, and he's having to reevaluate his future. Because if that's happening, and your property is not really your property, and people are making these arguments like, no, they already have a house. They don't need 2 houses. Those are just those rich people who are taking advantage of people that need homes. And I saw how that went in Cuba. Didn't work out well. John Delar says Nancy Pelosi doesn't want the House voting on it because too many conservative Democrats don't want to extend it. She's trying to protect them for the midterms, not even sure it would pass. Looks like it won't work. Can't wait until the midterms. Bye, Felicia. Your majority is gone like the wind. Ho! That's from John Delar. Good to see you, John Delar. Good energy on that one. Osak says, Rob, is it possible that COVID could be engineered to make Osak, that's medical information. We can't talk about any of that stuff here. YouTube doesn't allow that. Osak, look, the only thing that I can point you to is the CDC. Rochelle Walensky is kind of the smartest person in the world. So you should just do whatever she tells you to do indefinitely. She's very smart. Sharon Quidney says, you mentioned that nobody voted on the CDC regulations that didn't go through the legislature. Please. I ask, what the F difference does that make? None of the legal manipulations and machinations that took place preceding the election, none of them went through the legal or legislative process and were totally illegal and unconstitutional. We don't have a constitution anymore. This is a totalitarian regime, a dictatorship run by a bunch of lunatics. Sharon, you're not wrong. You're not wrong about that. We have a constitution. It is being dumped all over. COVID did that in spades. We have Avalon Acres says, so I'm in Alabama and I evicted someone during the moratorium, not due to non-payment, but because one threatened to kill himself. And during one of those threats managed to break skin. I have kids. We live on the same property. I couldn't risk him following through and none of my kids finding him. If they want to try to come after me, let them. No jury will blame me for kicking him out. You're probably right about that. We talk a lot about enforceability here, right? The government can pass whatever laws they want all day, but they got to enforce them. So on some of those things, I think that's where the balance of power shifts a little bit. Sharon says, it's amazing to me the Supremes have managed to grow a couple over the past year. Where were they last year when the Constitution was being shredded? Yeah. And that's the conversation that I was talking about, Sharon, about, this is a nice legal decision. It would have been nice to on the basis of separation of powers and that you cannot, one branch cannot usurp another branch. Would have been nice if they gave us that opinion during the last election when we were talking about some very serious issues there. No Doubt says, is SCOTUS brave right now because of the Afghan debacle that Biden is going through? It could very well be that, right? Remember that the Supreme Court is an institution that likes to protect its legitimacy because that is the key thing that makes it function, that it's seen as legitimate. They don't have an FBI. They don't have any enforcement mechanisms. They don't have a lot of political power because they're judges and they can't say much things. They've got sort of a limitation on their political engagement. And so they really focus on legitimacy. And that is relative to the legitimacy of the other branches, right? These are co-equal branches. And so if you're in a situation where it looks like America is sweeping Joe Biden into power and there's going to be this new reformation and America is going to be reborn again in the new vision of Joe Biden and it's all going to be unified and beautiful. Supreme Court is going, well, we got to maintain our institution and we're not going to rock that boat too much. So we're just going to kind of, play ball a little bit. But now their co-equal branch, the executive branch, sort of looks like it has been completely emasculated, like it's entirely incompetent, like the American people are watching this whole facade crumble in front of our eyes. And so their legitimacy is now subpar relative to the Supreme Court. So if the Biden team comes out now and says, we're going to pack the Supreme Court, suddenly the Americans who maybe once were sort of in favor of Joe Biden's vision for America are not anymore. And we look at that movement and we say, oh, yeah, this is a more insane, activities from this administration. We've already seen what that looks like in Afghanistan. Maybe they should not keep take their hands over to our Supreme Court. Good question. Jeremy Matridas here says, Rob, has the CDC established a direct correlation between an eviction and the contraction of COVID? In my opinion, COVID is being abused as an excuse to do things that couldn't previously be done before. When will this end? I don't think there's any correlation. That's sort of the argument that the Supreme Court was making, that it's so far removed. And you saw that in the language where they said, well, I mean, technically, yeah, if you evict somebody, there's going to be a subset of those people who move across state lines, which would engage interstate commerce, which is what would trigger the U.S. to get involved, the feds. I guess it's possible that when they move, they could get COVID and it could have been a result of the move. But that's kind of hard to define. And that's something that is like 3 steps removed from the original concept of the eviction that we're talking about. And so because it's so speculative and it's so far down the causal chain, it's not relevant enough and it's not appropriate. And the judge rightfully threw it out. It's Ed says, hey, Rob, maybe instead of putting up this eviction moratorium, if the government feels so passionately about this, why not give money directly to the renters instead of hurting the landlords? Oh, wait. They did give the renters money, a lot of money. A friend of mine refuses to go back to work because she will make less money. Since the lockdown and the unemployment payment, she has been able to remodel her house and refurnish it. Happy she can do that, but it's wrong when you consider how she got the money to do it. I get that life isn't fair, but it's wrong when it isn't fair because the government is making it unfair. Yeah, you're right about that. It's Ed. The government is useless. You know, they think that they can manipulate and move resources around to sort of fix problems. And what they do is they end up creating much more problems. We have a lot of people who are looking for employees, and there's not a lot of them. Why is that? It's because the federal government is creating situations exactly like the one you described. And it's pretty disgusting. Brotherhood of Nod. Command and Conquer's back in the house. Great game. The dissenting opinion comes across as arithmetic to enable mixing what is just and what is legal. The abolition of private property and the extension of the state authority has a name, has been tried, and is very bloody. Yeah, that's from the Brotherhood of Nod. That's an astute observation there, Brotherhood. We have Want to Know says the government is only paying landlords 80% of money or nothing. Oh, I didn't know that. So that's also another beautiful thing. So they're not even giving you fair market value for your delinquent tenants who you can't throw out. What a joke. We have a former LEO says, with deep disgust, I watched a TV interview. Oh, that's on the Ashli Babbitt. So I'm going to save that one for the next one. All right. So when that happens, I got to pause a little bit and then get over to the next question. So give me one quick second. Looks like a nice comment from former LEO, so I want to make sure that we get that. So 23, apologies there. 2 more on this segment, then we'll jump into the next one. We have Want to Know says, Rob, your new scribes are confused. They can't read you like I can when you're BSing. I'd love to play poker with you. Would you? You'd probably do well, right? I kind of wear my emotions on my face. I won't lie about that. The Last Villain says, I think the FU from the Biden administration made it clear to the limps in the court that they are 2 minutes away from irrelevance. It's a good comment. All right, let's see if we had any super chats that came in here over from YouTube. We have Eddie Oliver here. Okay, we have Jay. Here's Jay. Jay super chatted. Nice super chat. Says, great show, Rob. I always appreciate listening to the comments and the questions from the locals. They're great questions and great comments. We have amazing people who are part of that community, which is why I encourage you to come and join us over there. It's a lot of fun, and we have a meetup taking place tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully you can make it, Jay. Appreciate you being here. Joe Sosnowski says, search Joe Biden's Awakening on YouTube. You're welcome. Thanks, Joe. There are some really good Biden videos out there. I don't know if that's a funny one or a serious one, but I will take a look at it. Thanks for sharing that. Eddie Oliver says, Rob, how long before everyone recognizes this for what it is? This is not a pandemic. It is an endemic. It's not going away. I agree with you totally on that. I think that was the case 18 months ago, whenever it all started. The government, we're going to get control of this thing. No, you're not, idiots. And they didn't, and they're not going to. But they're going to continue to liberate you of all of your liberties for you. Isn't that nice of them? So that you don't have to think for yourself anymore. They're going to do all the thinking for you and just take care of everything. So just shut up, put your mask on, and shove that needle in your arm. Good to see you there, Eddie. We have another one from Warrior B. Yacht. Says, I can see Biden on the runway with his Chinese flag at the last hour screaming, closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. WTF. Well, Joe Biden, it's very emotional. You know, he might have some tears. Anthony Blinken, they're very upset about this whole thing. So have a little bit of, sympathy for these two men. You know, they've never been in a situation before where they've wrecked an entire nation's foreign policy that has catastrophic consequences throughout the world. They've never done that before. So you can empathize if you're going to be the person responsible for that. Like, you have a bad day at work and you go home and you're like, sweetheart, you're not going to believe what I said today. It was so dumb. I came out in a meeting. I have no idea why I said it. It was just the wrong thing to say. I felt so bad. I apologized after the fact, but I think the damage is done. This relationship, like, they're never going to look at me the same. Honey goes, yeah, that's a really bad day. It's pretty stupid. Okay. but you kind of move on, right? Go back to work. Don't talk to that person. Not good. Joe Biden wrecked most of the world. So he's having a hard time. And he should have a hard time because he is incompetent. And the people who put him in place should also have a hard time because they put him there. And people like you and me on this channel and elsewhere have been screaming about this incompetence for many, many months now, and it's all on full display. It's the I hate to say I told you so, right? It's here, and so it's appropriate to make sure that their faces are rubbed in it because they deserve it. What else do we have? Warrior B. Yacht says, holy crap, Rob, I rarely chat here, mostly watch the replay. Wow, you need some mods. You have a ton of trolls. Let me know if you need some help. Wowza. Do we? I'm sort of watching the chat as we go through here, but 7 p.m. Rob time. No. Okay. So 7 p.m. Rob time is 10 p.m. Miami time, but the Watching the Watchers Locals meetup is at 7 p.m. Eastern time. It's at 4 p.m. my time. So just want to clarify that. I saw that in the chat. Thank you for all of those super chats. Welcome, Warrior Yacht. Thank you for the offer. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about mods. I mean, it's no mods. They're saying no mods. You know, it's all right. We'll see. You know, there was a spammer there and I was able to get him, plug him out of there. Well, I appreciate the offer. I'm not sure how that works or, you know, how we'll see what everybody has to say. Those were great questions, as always, from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And thank you for the support over on YouTube as well. Thank you, Warrior B, Eddie Oliver, Joe Sosnowski, Jay, and Michael MJL as well. Very, very appreciative of all of that. All right, so our last segment of the day, we're talking about Ashli Babbitt again. And the person who shot her, Michael Byrd. So let's jump into it. Ashli Babbitt, shot and killed on the January 6th protests, the riots, the insurrection, the virtual end of America for many people. And since that day, a lot of us, people who monitor law enforcement, watch the police, try to hold them accountable because we fight for things like accountability and transparency, had a lot of questions about this officer-involved shooting because there was a woman who was in the Capitol building named Ashli Babbitt who was shot and killed. And typically when that happens, there's an investigation. You learn who the officer is, learn a little bit more about him, as we've seen in many other officer-involved shootings throughout the country. We've covered many of them on this channel. Specifically, talked about Ray Shard Brooks, we've talked about Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on and on and on. There's always a big inquiry. There's always multiple ways to analyze the shooting. We get to see some of the evidence and make our own decisions about this thing. We went through a whole trial with Derek Chauvin about that police death. But none of that happened here because this was the Capitol Hill police, and they're sort of secluded from the rest of us. They protect the Capitol, which is our congressional people, and of course, as we know, they are above the rest of us. So the same concepts of transparency and accountability that would apply to any other police department anywhere else in this nation never applied in this case. And so for many, many months, we had no idea who the shooter was. People speculated about it, but didn't get to see much about it until yesterday. Now, they told us that in the lead up until this big reveal, that the reason why this man could not be revealed and we could not know his identity is because of the danger to himself and to his family and all of the threats from the maniac MAGA Trumpers that were sending his way. And then he decided, after he was exonerated by his Capitol Hill Police Department, to just go do an interview with Lester Holt on NBC. So this is the guy. His name is Michael Byrd. He's a lieutenant. And he says in this interview that I saved countless lives. In the chaotic minutes before he shot and killed Ashli Babbitt, he said he focused his attention on the glass doors leading into the lobby of the representatives' chamber. 60 to 80 House members were holed up inside, he said, and rioters rampaged through the Capitol. You may remember the scene. This is from before the shooting took place. We talked about this earlier in the week when the Capitol Hill PD exonerated that man. This was the scene before Ashli Babbitt, who we can see here, sort of jumped up into this windowsill over here. Now, if you watch the full video, I made comment of this earlier in the week, that these three officers, for some bizarre reason, just kind of moved aside. They just got out of the way. And there were other officers coming up the stairwell from this right side of the screen. They were walking up this way. And they were on scene basically immediately after Ashli Babbitt was shot. The shooter was on the other side of this glass panel, and you can see that the glass here is barricaded. We have 3 officers who were in front of it. I am not going to play the full video, of course, because YouTube flags all of that as being 18 plus, and then we have to remove the video. So it's something that I would encourage you to watch if you haven't watched it already. Very strange behavior here, because these 3 cops who are guarding this, and if you watch this interaction, they are standing there and nobody is being violent with them. Nobody, I mean, they're in their faces and sort of shouting at them. But if the officers would have continued to stay there, that entryway, in my opinion, would have continued to have been blocked. There were other officers who were running up the stairwell as backup, literally, and there were other officers on the other side of the door, as we can see in this panel, right? This is the shooter. This is Lieutenant Michael Byrd, who did the shooting. There were, if you watch the video, there's many other people back here. There's nobody in immediate sight here that looks like that they're in danger. And so what ends up happening is these 3 officers abandon their posts. They go down the stairwell, and Ashli Babbitt hops right up into this windowsill where she is shot and killed by Lieutenant Byrd, this gentleman. Now, for the last 8 months, nobody knew who this guy was. People had a lot of questions about this shooting. How did this happen? Why was this not revealed to us? We've seen many other shootings where the first thing that happens is we know the name of the cop. We spent many episodes on this show talking about it all last month. In some cases, I defended the officers. In some cases, I defended the defendants. But we always got to take a look at the evidence and then make an analysis for ourselves. And often that included the government's evidence. Body-worn cameras. Remember the Chauvin body cameras that we dissected almost frame by frame? None of that came out here, so we never got to piece it together. And the excuse was always that it's too dangerous. This man is going to be attacked by the Trumpers, by the MAGA-ers, and this is not appropriate. So the Capitol Hill police said that they're not going to release it. Then they cleared him, and we know his name. Here it is, telling us yesterday with Lester Holt.
Your name has been battered about on the internet, but you've never been officially, publicly identified. Do you want to tell us who you are?
My name is Michael Byrd. I'm a lieutenant for the United States Capitol Police.
There you go. So we got a name out of him. Now, why is it coming out now? Today is August 27th. That's because on August 23rd, we got this. The internal investigation from the Capitol Police is exonerating this guy. They reviewed multiple witnesses, reviewed all the available evidence, including video and radio calls, none of which we have seen. None of it, right? They reviewed it. Multiple witnesses. They completed their internal investigation of the shooting of Ashli Babbitt, and that occurred, of course, on January 6th. They sent it over to their OPR, their Office of Professional Responsibility, and they determined that the conduct was lawful and within the department's policies, which said that they may use deadly force as long as there's an immediate danger of serious physical injury, right? So they go through their own thing, and they do their own analysis, something we have never seen, don't know what their policies are, don't know what the analysis was. They give us this stupid press release. They tell us that they've completed their internal investigation, don't see any of the videos, don't see any of the radio calls. It's all private. Then the officer in this case, who is not being identified for the officer's safety, will not be facing internal discipline. So if the Capitol Hill Police won't release the name for internal safety, why is this guy on Lester Holt's show on NBC? 4 days later. Must be really scary for him. Must be really, petrified. Or he just got cleared and now it's time to go and get the book deal. And now it's time to go and make your face, make the rounds on all the media shows, because it's cleared. Nothing's going to happen to him. The Justice Department has said they're not charging him. And the Capitol Police did their investigation, and they're not going to do anything about it either. So now that that's all done and closed, now it's time to go hit the media circuit, which is exactly what he's doing. The officer and his families have been the subject of numerous credible threats, got that. And the actions of this officer, in this case, they say, potentially saved members and staff from serious injury and possible death from a large crowd of rioters. Okay, so you can subject that can be subject to a matter of opinion. You might even watch all of the actual evidence and say, yeah, that was a clean shoot. That was a good shoot. Maybe I would do that too. Maybe if I watched everything, I would say, yeah, look, that was a scary situation. They were right around the corner. There really was no backup. He really did hear something over the radio that shots had been fired. It was chaotic. You've got a situation. You got to protect the Speaker of the House, man. And so you might even empathize with the man and say, look, it was a clean shoot. It was a horrible situation. But we can't do that because they're not showing us anything. And they're telling us that this person was perfectly competent, that the Capitol Hill police are perfectly competent, that nothing went wrong, that their internal investigations with OPR and the IA division all went swimmingly well. So we, as the American people, should just go, oh, the Capitol Hill police, oh, look, they said that they're going to do an investigation. Are they going to hire outside counsel? Are they going to hire an inspector general? Are they going to outsource this to somebody else? No, they're going to do it internally. And they're going to follow their own Office of Professional Responsibility guidelines, and they're going to look at it themselves and then vindicate themselves. They investigate themselves and find they did nothing wrong. And then we're just supposed to believe that. Oh, okay. And it's all a matter of perfect competency, and everything's done admirably. What a hero. But then you learn about stuff like this, that this officer some time ago, back in 2019, left his weapon unattended in the Capitol bathroom, which is not a good place to leave a weapon. It's not a good idea to leave a weapon anywhere. So like if you left it at an IHOP, for example, or at your local Costco, not a good place to leave a weapon. A worse place is in the Capitol building, where you've got a lot of Congress people who are, highly sensitive VIPs in their own minds. So if you forget look, many people might try to sneak and smuggle a gun into the congressional building. This guy just made it easy for him. Don't even have to do that. There's one in the bathroom ready and waiting for you. U.S. Capitol Police Lieutenant left his service weapon in the bathroom on Monday night, later discovered by another Capitol Police officer. So he didn't go back and get it or report it missing. Somebody else found it. After the House adjourned on Monday, Lieutenant Mike Byrd left his Glock 22 in the Capitol Visitor Center complex, according to sources familiar with the incident. He addressed the incident on Tuesday morning during officers' roll call, told fellow officers, quote, he will be treated differently because of his rank as a lieutenant. Not clear what exactly he meant by that comment. Unlike a regular gun, a Glock will fire if the trigger is pulled, because it doesn't have a traditional safety, they say. Capitol Police said a service weapon was discovered during a routine security sweep on Monday. Once it was secured, the department began an immediate investigation into the matter. They take these things very seriously. And I don't point that out to sort of rub this guy's nose in this, but it is something that is pertinent in these investigations. That's why you want the names of people, so you can go and ask these types of questions and say, hey, maybe this guy's not so competent that he just forgot his Glock 22 in a bathroom in the congressional building as a Capitol Hill police. Not particularly astute here. Now, to be fair, Lester Holt asked him about this very briefly in this interview. I did not clip it because he says, yeah, I did that and I accept responsibility for it and I'm trying to do better. So he did answer it, but not meaningfully. It was meaningful, but my point here is it's sort of I understand that people make mistakes. I'm not even upset about that. I'm upset about the accountability and the transparency that was missing here, that the U.S. is telling us, the U.S. Capitol Police are telling the American people, you're not entitled to any information about this at all until we say you are, or until he decides to voluntarily speak out and go on interview circuits. Now, Lester Holt, in this wild exchange, is asking about racist threats and wants to make sure that he gets that on the record. So he asks an open-ended question of Michael Byrd. Lester Holt says, have you been attacked and assaulted, or sort of threatened verbally as a result of your involvement in this thing? Which is interesting because nobody knew what his name was until about 10 minutes ago last night, officially. There was speculation about it, but now we know. He says, so somebody that nobody knew about, you were getting a lot of threats, weren't you? Here's what he says.
Talked about, killing me, cutting off my head, very vicious and cruel things.
Racist things?
There it is.
There were some racist attacks as well. It's all disheartening because I know I was doing my job.
So Lester Holt, you could see him, he's just like spring-loaded, just ready to go. Well, they were saying hateful things and mean things, and they were attacking my integrity, and they were attacking my, my valor and my service and my decision. And, yeah, but racist things? Did they ask you? Did they say racist things? Yeah, they did say some racist things there, Lester Holt. Why don't you calm down there, buddy? Because I was getting there. Relax. Stop jumping the gun on the thing. Now, this is what he talks about. So I want to spend a little bit of time actually talking about what the officer saw, right? There was this interview that took place, and there are some facts about the shooting that we can actually glean, right? This is not just an entertainment piece. It was for them, but I wanted to see if we can actually extract some concepts about what took place with the shooting. Here is where he talks about the shots being fired.
Did you ever hear a call or a report of shots fired during any of this?
As a matter of fact, I did. There was reports of shots fired through the house main door onto the floor of the chamber.
Later, those reports would prove to be false. This video captures Byrd instructing members of Congress to don gas masks.
We had a disbursement of tear gas in the rotunda. Please be advised there are masks under your.
All right, so they got masks under their seats. And so he's kind of, going around. Now, the pertinent part there was about hearing over the radio that he heard shots had been fired. Now, you also heard that Lester Holt said that that was later proven to be untrue. Right? Nobody was shot, as far as my knowledge, right? Nobody was shot and killed. And I didn't even realize that there were guns going off anywhere. I don't think that happened at all, which is surprising if you're a group of insurrectionists who want to seize control of the country. You'd think you'd bring some guns, especially if you were with one of these organized militia groups that, nobody was. So interesting there that he got that over the radio, right? That sort of raises the level of his concern. If the intelligence that's being fed to him is indicating that there is, an active shooting situation, now that sort of escalates your response. Now, that turned out to be inaccurate. My question would be, well, where'd that come from? Who said that? What time was that? Is that accurate? Is he making that up? Did that actually be broadcast? Are there any other witnesses to corroborate that? I mean, presumably that's what the Internal Affairs and OPR was doing when they were investigating him, but we don't know because there's no evidence. There's no report. There's nothing. It's just his statement in America when he shot and killed somebody. And we have no evidence. There's nothing for her to look at other than she's dead. Her family's dead. Her attorney's just sort of looking at the Capitol Hill police that just said, we investigated things and we did a damn good job, and there's nothing else to look for. Thanks. Not appropriate at all. All right, let's see what else he says. So my next question was about the warning. Okay, we've talked about many officer-involved shootings on this channel, and oftentimes they will give a very clear verbal warning. Stop, drop the knife, boom. Then they pull the shot, right? And they give warnings to stop from having to execute somebody, from having to shoot and kill somebody. Didn't see much of that in this situation because Ashli Babbitt just jumped right up into the window, sort of the busted out window, and she was shot while standing in there. She never made it through the barrier so that they could have a conversation or anything. She stands up right into there. As soon as she gets up, boom, he shoots her. So the question was he warning her? Was he yelling? Was he screaming? Was he telling her to stop? I'm going to shoot, giving her an audible warning about this so that she knows that there's a man with a gun extended and saw it and recognized it and maybe she decided to go anyways. And that's when he pulled. But we don't know because we don't have anything to look at other than a stupid press release from the Capitol Hill Police that doesn't tell us anything. So Lester Holt, ask him about this. Did you warn them at all? Were you saying anything? Here's what he has to say.
Yelling and screaming as loud as I was, please stop, get back, stop.
Okay, so that's about all we got out of that. So, stop, get back, not a verbal warning of I'm going to shoot or stop or I will shoot or anything like that. So, who knows what actually happened there, but he is hit, they are checking that box. They're going through here, checking the box, and they checked that one. I gave a verbal warning. All right. Now, how about this? What about, did he see a weapon? Did he see anything in her hands, right? Because the general theory is you use deadly force to combat deadly force. If somebody is not doing something that might result in somebody's death to you or to somebody else or to themselves, well, then you typically don't use deadly force. We've talked about this many times on the show. The spectrum, the continuum, the use of force continuum, that there are different elements that will escalate what level of force is appropriate. If somebody is stealing a candy bar, you don't shoot them in the head because that's not an appropriate use of force. You use the amount of force that's necessary given the conditions, the circumstance, and the scenario. And we are asking questions about that in this case. What did Ashli Babbitt have in her hands? Anything? Did he see anything? Did he see a weapon? Because she didn't have one. She was unarmed. And so did he make that determination? Did he come to that conclusion in his mind? I don't know. Let's see what he tells Lester Holt, since we're not going to hear anything from the Capitol Hill police.
I was taking a tactical stance. You're ultimately hoping that your commands will be complied with, and unfortunately they were not.
When you fired, what could you see? Where were you aiming?
You're taught to aim for center mass. The subject was sideways, and I could not see her full motion of her hands or anything. So I guess her movement, caused the discharge to fall where it did.
Yeah, so I mean, you heard from him, right? Couldn't see her hands, couldn't really see anything, couldn't see whether she had a weapon or not, gave her some warning, shot her center mass. She was falling forward as she was coming through the barrier and, got hit in the neck, fell back through the barrier, was coming forward, fell back through the barrier, and was dead, right? There were cops who were standing there right behind her, if you watch the full video. So I think the shoot was totally unnecessary. He said he warned her, but we didn't say anything about, a lethal force warning or anything. It was just, stop, get back, screaming. Did we see that in the video? I don't know. He had his mask on because he was concerned about COVID as well. In the middle of an insurrection, you got to make sure you have your mask on because COVID it might be more deadly than the insurrectionists. I don't know. So, who knows what he was saying? You couldn't see his mouth moving at all. And he said that he was giving verbal warnings, whether that's true or not. Pretty clear he didn't see a weapon, didn't even see her hands, didn't look at that, so doesn't know whether she has anything or not. And, apparently that alone is enough. That's enough. That's how you can save some lives. She didn't have a weapon, but she could have, but she didn't, but she could have. And because she could have, then maybe he could have saved some lives. So I don't know. So he's very happy with himself, as is the Capitol Hill Police, as is Lester Holt. Let's see what he has to say about saving lives that day.
Capitol Police, in their press release after exonerating you, said your actions potentially saved members and staff from serious injury and possible death. What was it like to hear those words, to see those words?
Those words meant a lot, because that's exactly what I did on that day. That was my mission. That was what I prepared for. And it's rewarding and refreshing to hear that.
Okay. He seems genuine to me. Look, it was not a good situation on January 6th. I think that what we saw from the Capitol Hill Police was so lacking in accountability and transparency that their response was not appropriate at all. Ashli Babbitt is a dead woman. Whether the shoot was justified or not, her family is entitled to due process. She's entitled to know who the shooter was and what the investigation was that suddenly concluded that he was not responsible for anything other than a legitimate shoot. To take their word for that is asking too much. The family deserves some clarity, some accountability, and some transparency there. They're not going to get it, and nobody cares about it. So now that he's out, now that his name is publicly available, very likely he's going to be sued, and the Capitol Hill Police are going to be sued by Ashli Babbitt's attorney. We talked about their opinion on this last time, which reiterated a lot of what we just talked about there. Didn't see any weapon at all. Was presuming that this was a situation that involved, that would have required lethal force, but we didn't see any other weapons from anybody else coming through that line either. And so let's see what you have to say about all this. I know this one is can kind of split people down the middle on this. So let's check in and see what Locals has to say about this over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got some good questions here, and I forgot that I opened up the other one here from former LEO. So let's get this one first. It says, with deep disgust, I watched a TV interview with an individual who was alleged to be a sworn law enforcement officer. Sat back and I reviewed the sworn oaths that I have first when I enlisted in the U.S. Navy and again when I was sworn in as a peace officer. Both oaths require that I protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And one of the oaths granted me permission to enforce the laws of the state of California. I even thought back to all of my training, including the post certificates and my department's policies and procedures, and I was unable to find specifically the section that allowed the murder of an unarmed citizen based on a guess. Yeah, it's probably not in there. Yeah, and so he's talking about all of the rules and regulations that he had to comply with, all of the oaths that he swore, not in there. This hurts to me to say that this justice is not only blind, but it appears that justice isn't colorblind. This hurts me to say this. Justice is not only blind, but it appears that justice isn't colorblind. If this incident had the suspect and the victim's races reversed, I can almost guarantee the out just re-examining some of the givens that I've accepted as a fact. That's from former LEO. Thank you for sharing that, former LEO. Yeah, I completely agree with you. If you reversed the racial demographics in this story, you'd have a different outcome, wouldn't you? Let's say, you could take the same scenario. What happens if some of the BLM protesters that broke into the 3rd precinct there in Minneapolis, who were walking around setting fire to different documents within the precinct, what happens if the police would have just shot them? Said it's a threat. There are people in our building that we're scared about. It's not different. It's the Capitol building, but it's just Congress people. All right, former LEO says, sorry about that. Being painted with the same rush is enraging. Oh, it's all good. That's from LEO. I'm not sure what you're apologizing about, but that's okay. Let's see here. What are the results of the mandatory blood draw as part of the OIS protocol? It's a good question there. That's from former LEO as well. Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, right. There's a lot of data that you get out of an investigation. I'd like to see it. We're not going to. Thunder7 says, how was Ashli a threat to the big cop who would have knocked her down with a quick hit to her legs? Isn't he trained to deal with nonviolent events? Was Ashli going to run down the corridor and hit Pelosi with her backpack? Moronic cop had left his gun in the washroom twice. Probably has a drug or alcohol problem. I can't believe he got away with murder. It's from Thunder7. Yeah, I know. News Now Wyoming says, that was a spicy comment. News Now Wyoming says, why do you have to review the evidence? The police have said the shooting was good, and who are we to question it? They work for Congress, so all the other rules don't apply to them. So why should any review of the evidence apply to them? Just listen, bow down, and obey. News Now, you're right. Sometimes I get carried away, which is why I need to come on this show and just kind of get put back in my place. They know better than me. They're smarter than I am. They're really good people, and they do everything right. They have nothing to hide. Totally ethical and full of integrity. Okay, so we've got former LEO says, former LEO's hot, says, what was the result of the investigation by an outside agency, and what agency did the outside investigation? 4 question marks on that from former LEO. That's how you know he's hot. I agree with him, right? We don't see any of the evidence. First Amendment says, by the way, no mods, no fact checkers, please. We believe in free speech, even for the trolls. They have a right to post no matter how dumb they are. Only spammers should be removed as they take up too much space. That's from the First Amendment. And I have a slightly modified rule on that. It's dinner table manners. You can troll the hell out of everything you want. Right? You have a lot of trolls at dinner tables. You always have that guy that's like, hey, Grandma, what do you think about Joe Biden? You go, wait for this? And you wait for Grandma to just come out there and just start dunking on Joe Biden. Everybody else at the table goes, ugh, here we go again. I have that. I sort of have that in my family. I'm sort of a troll to some degree. I have an amazing person in my family. I won't out him publicly, but he's got strong opinions on COVID. And so every time I see him, I say, hey, and he's a esteemable person with a lot of knowledge on these issues in the medical profession. So I'm very actually interested in what he has to say. I'm not just trolling, but I'll say, hey, uncle, what's your latest thoughts on COVID? And then it's like an hour and a half of just a waterfall of data. And I love it. I asked for a reason, but everybody else at the table is like, oh, God, here we go again. But it's all useful. It's productive. It's good conversation. And so we'll allow those types of trolls. But it's dinner table manners, right? You sort of, we all can recognize that we're all needling each other to a certain extent. Okay, I get on the show, and to some extent, I know that there's going to be trolls over here on YouTube that are just going to love my moral outrage, my moral indignation, and they're going to have a lot of fun going, that guy's crazy. He's out of his mind. Let's listen to this rant. What the hell is he talking about? He's going nuts over here. What a psycho person. And that's fun. And I encourage that. Come on in here. and go hog wild. But we want to be respectful, right? When we start calling each other names, when we start saying things like, implying death and you're an F in this and an F in A and all this type of stuff, that's not dinner table manners. And so we gotta ask those people to leave the dinner table, and hopefully they get better manners next time. But that's the policy of the show. Bulletproof Body says, bad shooting. This is a cover up. I'm a former LAPD sergeant. I've conducted OISs. That's from Bulletproof Body. There we go. So that's 3 for 3 on the show now. First of all, Bulletproof Body, thank you for being here, former LAPD sergeant. We have a former Portland sergeant as well, and we have a former LEO. Also, 3 for 3, bad shooting, and it's a cover up. So that's great. So it's not just me who's saying that. Thank you for sharing that as well. Jeremy Matrita says, the reason they didn't release anything from the investigation is because we would hear Nancy Pelosi shouting over the radio to shoot these MFers shortly before Byrd fired a shot. Unfortunately, the Capitol Police won't be able to refute my claim because of the lack of their transparency. Oh, that's too good. That is hilarious, Jeremy. And you're right? You can make up and say Nancy Pelosi said whatever. Nancy Pelosi said, yeah, maybe she said that we should just pull out the machine guns and the cannons and just blast all these Trumpers back into the Stone Age. She might have said that. She probably did say that. In fact, there's no court in America has concluded that Nancy Pelosi did not say that she wanted all the Trumpers to be nuked back into oblivion. I've never seen a court of law that has ever confirmed that she did not say that. So as far as I'm concerned, she said it. And the Capitol Police, if they want to rebut that claim, they're free to do so. All they need to do is release some of the discovery and all of the documentations to rebut that claim. But henceforth, Nancy Pelosi wanted to nuke the Trumpers because there's no evidence to the contrary. I think that's how they do things there. So we're in good company. Perry Masonary says, why isn't this guy getting the Chauvin treatment? He already demonstrated his incompetence by leaving his service weapon unattended in a bathroom. I think you can probably guess as to why he's getting different treatment. Well, number one, the races are reversed, so that obviously has a component. But number two, this was the killing of a Trumper, of a MAGA person, and they don't have any value in the modern version of America. They're political prisoners. You can shoot and kill them without any due process. Nobody cares, because under the current administration, they are political enemies. That's the answer. Sergeant Bob is here, says, when I was in Portland, officers set up a 6th-floor hotel room to call out a wanted guy. The guy came busting out his door and ran towards the elevators. One of the sergeants on scene let loose a few rounds, nearly hitting several other officers. He thought he, quote, saved the day. He was first terminated, then later reinstated, but as an officer, no way he should have shot. This lieutenant is just as delusional. No one can tell me that he is not receiving favorable treatment because of his race. As I said before, this looks like a, quote, bad shooting. Of course, transparency would help us have a more informed opinion. Sounds like the Capitol Police is the KGB. That's from Sergeant Bob. 3 for 3 on the show. Former LEO, all chiming in. Amazing. Thank you, Sergeant Bob. Yeah, I agree with you. It would be good to have more evidence. And if you did, maybe you could come back out and say, yeah, no, it looked good. But not from what I can see here. Wide Awake says, this in my eyes is Floyd 2.0. Racist things, Lester Holt. Did they say racist things to you? Are you sure? Let's stop with the rest of the script here. Let's talk about more of the racism here, Officer Byrd. Tell me all the racist things they said to you. Anything else? Let's keep going about them. Did they say this word? How about that word? Because that's what matters, obviously. John Delar says, I'm starting to feel like the tide is turning. People are starting to wake up. I don't think the Capitol Police and the government will get away with this crap forever. Rest in peace, Ashli Babbitt. I think so too, John Delar. The Afghanistan situation is making people realize what a joke our government is. The whole thing. Everything. From top to bottom. We have I'm Not Gas says, LMAO, this guy's Facebook was loaded with anti-Trump crap and was identified shortly after the shooting. He's probably waiting for the chance to shoot a Trump supporter. Yeah, I know. I know he was identified earlier than the day, but I didn't see any of that evidence. But, it's just, okay, we're going to stop there. Joe Biden says, hang on, I need to get some ice cream. It's Friday, Joe. You're done with the week. You earned it. Get 2 scoops. Former LEO says the Glock 22 is not a 22 caliber rim fire round. It's chambered for the 40 Smith & Wesson round, which is much more powerful than the 9mm, has a mag capacity of 15 rounds. That's a lot of firepower. Yeah, I think I have a Glock 22, actually. I think I do. I have several Glocks, but I don't know if it's a G22 specifically. That might be a law enforcement model, but I think I have a version of the civilian model. All right, obviously I'm not law enforcement, but yeah. I know it's not. Yeah, it's a serious weapon. That's why I bought it. Let's see what else we have. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's not a 22. No way. Spawn Dog says the officer was coached, plain and simple, which is absolutely true. He went through, if you watch the full interview, it's 6 minutes. I didn't want to play the whole thing because it's a lot of Lester Holt talking, but and it's a lot of the fluff, right? Oh, okay. So I didn't want to go through that, but he checks all the boxes. You know, draw the sting out of the competency question, check that one. Talk about the bathroom thing, check that one. Talk about the the fear for my life, check that one. You know, the list goes on and on. So it's all just by the script. We have Sharon Quidney says, I really don't like having to ask this, but I wonder what the outcome would have been if the races were reversed. If a white cop had shot up an unarmed black woman and a BLM and NAACP, not to mention the Southern Poverty Law Center and Maxine Waters would have been all over it. My guess is the outcome would have been entirely different. You're probably right about that, Sharon. Unless they were also insurrectionists. You know, I don't know. Probably. Yeah, let's see. All right, we've got Sergeant Bob says, great analysis and discussion. You know your stuff. Thanks, Sergeant Bob. That's a nice endorsement. It's a nice endorsement. I hope so, because we're running a company. I hope I know a little bit of some stuff. But, you know, the real value here is your input, Sergeant Bob. The fact that I can sort of rant a little bit, and you and former LEO and former LAPD, the fact that we can have these conversations is really where I think the value is. You know, anybody can sort of opine on things, but the fact that you join here consistently and share some feedback makes these segments so amazing. So thank you for doing that. Lord Nelson is here, says, Miss Babbitt standing next to officers who saw no reason to restrain her. He thought it was imperative to pull that trigger. Yeah. Yeah, and it's even worse than that, Lord Nelson. I mean, those cops left. They moved out of the way. And I don't know why they did that. And then as soon as Ashli Babbitt was shot, there were all sorts of cops right there on scene. It's weird. If they were all talking to each other on radios, you would expect them to sort of know that the situation was under control. But not. All right. Osak says, Rob, I now understand why the Biden group loves the Taliban so much. Here's why: the Taliban disarming civilians, population. All right. So Osak, that's a good comment, but I can't read that in this segment because I'm on the Ashli Babbitt stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, it's a good comment. Midnight Lime says, hopefully get some funding for stun guns for the Capitol Hill police. Or, like Joe Biden recommended, just shoot him in the leg. We have I'm Not Gas says, I'm so glad Mr. Byrd feels like he is such a hero for shooting an unarmed 90-pound woman. What a brave, fearless man. Yeah, they're very happy about this. Want to Know says, haha, they're just congressmen, so they don't count. Yeah, it's like, all right, get a few of them. All right, do whatever you want to do with them. Who cares? Says, chairman of the board says, I'm torn on this, but I can't really hold an officer at fault for firing, but is a warning shot legal as a first measure? I don't think Ashli Babbitt being a threat was as much of a threat as the unknown of the mob behind her, and I would think the officer would be concerned about being overrun if he let her through. But there are just too many unanswered questions about all of this, in my humble opinion. You have officers taking selfies, waving people in, moving barricades, not to mention all of the turning down of help before, when they knew this was a potentially bad event. It's hard not to have a conspiracy theory that there were some on the left that wanted the metaphorical powder keg to blow up that day. I can't understand why we aren't getting an investigation on all of that. Great show as always, Rob. Sorry I'm not around live as much lately. Hope to see you tomorrow. It's good to see you, Chairman of the Board. Yeah, I appreciate you being here, and I do hope to see you tomorrow. And I'm grateful for the time that you can show up and submit those tremendous questions, the comments, because I agree with you. You know, the institutions that we look to for truth are not purveyors of truth. So when they tell us something happens, it's appropriate for us to question it. And in this case, when they're telling us that this was a perfectly clean shoot and everything went accordingly and everything that we saw on the screens was exactly how it happened, it's okay to question that. And it's actually an American thing to do. It's to say, no, we're not going to just believe what you said happened. We're going to investigate this. That's why we have things like due process that are written into our Constitution. Very important concepts that we should not be so quick to overlook, especially when it's easy to sort of throw this whole thing under the rug on the basis that it was an insurrection. This is a politically disfavored class, and so we can just forget about them because they don't matter. No, those people matter more than anything. It's those people that need the protection the most. It's the people that society says, we're just going to forget about them. They're the worst of the worst of the worst. And so what if we just bend the rules of due process a little bit? Who cares about that? That's the first chip in the structure that leads to cascading tyranny. So we can't let that happen here. So we have to call it out. Thank you for being here, Chairman of the Board, and for asking the right questions. Former LEO says, just remember that the Keystone Cops, also known as the Capitol Police, are coming to a city near you. Says, it's okay, I talked myself down. Yeah, there's less punctuation marks here. Just one period instead of 4 question marks or like 6 exclamation points. But former LEO, listen, I'm with you, man. I get hot about these stories too, so I'm glad that you're right there with me. Yeah, and they are. The Capitol Police are expanding all over America. So if you like what you saw from Michael Byrd, guess what? You too might be shot unnecessarily in your home state as well. It's coming right around the corner. I'm excited. No Doubt says Capitol policy displays overwhelming signs of guilt by covering up. Byrd innocent until proven guilty. Capitol policy displays overwhelming signs of guilt by covering up. Yeah, so there you go. It's a good way to frame it, right? Byrd is innocent until proven guilty, but we want to see some of the evidence so we can see whether that was a clean shoot or not. We already know that he forgot his gun in the Capitol Hill bathroom, so not exactly, top of his A game there. Bumma Lickett says, I'm pro law enforcement 100%, but the way they handle the investigation, it's so hush-hush. That gives me the reason to question a bit. I guess BLM matters more rather than all lives matter. Yeah, we always knew that was the case. Yeah, always knew that was the case. That's from Bumma Lickett. Let's see. We got a few more here before we wrap up. Says, Robin Roberts says, did they say racist things? Juicy Smollett? Juicy Smollett, the famous French actor. Oh, we have a user who's spamming over here. Let me get rid of this. Oh, no, I think that person's gone. Oh, look. We have a spammer on YouTube. Can you believe this? I just was talking about that. And we're going to have to... I think that solves that problem. Yeah, that solves that problem. Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't have to do that much, so I don't really know how to do that. But that is now, looks like it's, taken care of. Hey, sweet. All right, no more spam over there. All right, Juicy Smollett, the famous French actor who was responsible for his own hate crime. Yeah, that guy. Joe Biden is here, wants to know, is tomorrow 7 p.m. your time, 10 p.m. Eastern time? No, Joe Biden. Tomorrow is 4 p.m. my time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So same time as the show. Same time tomorrow. Don't want to go too late just so that everybody can get back to their Saturday nights. But speaking of that, let's get over there. Before we hop in here, I want to pull up some of these questions from YouTube. We had a super chat here from Tager Witziffy. Says, it is convenient that she's a Trumper also. It is very convenient for the government. We had another one from Tager says, as I said the other day, I believe Ashli was sacrificed as a warning to the other people in the crowd. Her being killed was crowd control, right? And I think that's probably some truth to that, but that's not an appropriate reason to shoot and kill somebody, right? Which I think is the problem with that. Crowd control doesn't justify that type of force. All right, great questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com and from YouTube. Shout outs to Tager Witziffy, Warrior B. We had Eddie Oliver, all with some very nice super chats, and I appreciate all of you. Also want to welcome some new members who just signed up over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you signed up after this, you're going to make next week's, but big welcomes to Monster One, who just signed up, along with JS Rowe 2019. Super excited to have you both here. This week, Grim Nightmare 7 signed up, Chai Web Dev, along with Action Man signed up for the year, along with Grim Nightmare. Doc Thunderbone signed up with Miss Donnie 2021, and of course, a big shout out to Tweak for the love and support over at ericshouse.org. Also, welcomes to Jagman, MJB, WWW, Mustang Jeff was here today, Keeper 21, Cool Guy 18,000, Sapper Jackson, Ken Northunder, Mr. MBP in the house, along with WC Hodges, Watcher45. Had some people sign up last week as well. If you want to join in on the community, it's $5 a month, $50 a year. You can save 2 months if you join up at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And we're going to be here tomorrow on a Saturday doing a live Zoom meetup. It's a monthly locals meetup. Here's what the invitation looks like. 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that means at 4 p.m. Arizona time, we're going to hop on there. The same time as the show, we're going to do the monthly watchingthewatchers.locals.com meetup. And it is not recorded. We are going to do this. It's an event. It's like a clubhouse room, but we get to look at each other. So you get to come in on Zoom, turn your camera on if you want, leave it off if you don't want it on. You can use your real name if you want, or don't. The chat will be going, and so you don't even have to say anything. You can just hop in on there and sort of see what the conversation looks like. We don't really even have an agenda. We just kind of talk about whatever comes up. I like to hear where people are from, and then sort of, get some feedback in the chat. Where are you from? Let us know where you're from, and then raise your hands and throw out a question, and we'll take some thoughts on the show, on the world, anything you want to talk about. It's a free-for-all, and it's a lot of fun. It's for an hour, so it's very low investment. Come for a little bit, leave for a little bit, not recorded, so it's there and then it's not. So I want you to be there tomorrow, Saturday, August 28th, 7 to 8 p.m. We do this once a month, and it's a good time, so I hope to see you there tomorrow. And that, my friends, is it for me for the day. We're going to wrap up the show. It's been a very busy week, a very tragic week, a very hard week, and so this weekend, we want to make sure that we unplug a little bit, that we make sure we spend some time with our families, our friends, that we get some rest and relaxation, and we sleep, reset our minds a little bit, because we got to be back here next week to do it again. A lot of people, a lot of institutions, a lot of government bureaucrats to hold accountable, to make sure they're being transparent, because we're all working towards justice. We're building a community to that end, and I want to thank you for being a part of it. Back here next week, Monday, 4 p.m. Arizona time, 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, that's all on Monday. But tomorrow, I'm going to see you at those same times as well. Thank you so much for being here. Have a tremendous rest of your Friday night. I'll see you right back here on Monday if I don't see you tomorrow. Have a great evening, my friends. See you next time. Bye-bye.